Chapter 1574. These words were just right, and they also touched Jiang Wuqing's heart, causing him to be moved. However, considering that he had once received Zhu Huilio's kindness, would it be too unjust to do so? Also, how trustworthy was Yao Yingjuan's words? Jiang Wuqing had already opened his mouth to agree, but he closed it tightly again. There was no such thing as betrayal in this world. The only reason there was no betrayal was because the bargaining chip was not high enough. Or perhaps the threat was not high enough. If Yao Yingjun had not found him before, Jiang Wuqing might have had a choice and could have chosen the right time. However, now that Yao Yingjun had found him, he could only make a choice. He could either agree or not. Could he not agree? No one was willing to surrender. However, how could Jiang Wuqing, with a mere 50,000 soldiers, stop the 5-star army's might? Furthermore, the 50,000 soldiers under him belonged to the local army. In the end, their combat strength was only average. With such an army, Jiang Wuqing had already lost the confidence to fight against the experienced 5-star army before the battle even started. Whether it was because he had seen the situation clearly or because his strength was not enough, Jiang Wuqing had no choice but to make a decision. He looked at Yao Yingjun and asked, "But I don't know if I choose to surrender to the 5-star army. What kind of guarantee can I get?" Southern Cloud Manor. There were less than 2 hours left before the sky turned dark. A gloomy atmosphere shrouded the city, giving people a very oppressive feeling. For the past 2 days, the commotion at night was not small, especially last night. The sound of cannons and gunshots were so dense. Anyone who was not a fool would know what was going on. It must be said that the common people were the most honest group. As long as they could survive, they would not do anything excessive. For example, words like swallowing their anger and living an ignoble life were used by them. However, when something happened and threatened their lives, they would change into a different appearance and reveal their fangs. In other words, the mighty army of the East had awakened. Who was Bugnom of Gojoseon? Needless to say, everyone in Southern Cloud Manor knew. There were even many people who yearned for the Yangxie's life and thought of ways to seek refuge there. Originally, Yang Qindong had a good foundation of the people. This time, Yang Qindong was willing to take the risk in order to not let the common people of the 3 provinces suffer from the chaos of war. At this moment, he had won the hearts of the people. This was the general trend that Yang Qindong needed. Now that the general situation had been set, but the 3 provincial kings still wanted to kill Wu Nanwang, how could the common people in the city be willing to do so? This was no longer a matter of 2 kings fighting. If things went wrong, the common people in the city would be affected. If they still did not do anything, in the end the city would be killed. Once such a terrible result appeared in the minds of the common people, who could remain calm. It was at this time that the spies sent by Yang Sen came into effect. They mixed in with the common people and talked about the powerful relationship. More and more common people felt the crisis. Finally, waves of common people in the city began to rush in the direction of the destroyed courtyard with all kinds of weapons in their hands. Southern Cloud Manor was a big city. Not to mention its history, just the fact that it was the place where the former Sheeping Mansion and the current mansion of the 3 provinces were located, it had attracted a lot of commoners. The number of commoners here had reached more than 500,000 people at one point. Due to the chaos of war, the proportion of adult men was not high. However, even if the ratio was 10 to 1, it was still possible to gather 50,000 people. Not to mention, when the matter concerned their own safety in life and death, it was not only the adult men who would stand up. Some of the older men and some of the younger women also stood up together in order to seek a way out. They formed a mighty team and slowly rushed to the courtyard where Yang Qindong was. The kings of the 3 provinces who were paying close attention to the situation in the city quickly reported the matter to Zhu Huihua. In this regard, the kings of the 3 provinces who already had a countermeasure ordered to send out 20,000 veterans and 10,000 newly recruited, able-bodied men to guard the periphery. Once they found that the common people dared to attack the former, they would be killed without mercy. At the same time, Zhu Huihua also gave the last 15,000 soldiers he had left to Wang Zhangjiang. The mission he gave him was to take Yang Qindong's life tonight, no matter what the cost. This was a desperate move, and no one stopped him. Although this was the last resort, at this moment, there was no better way to do it. But what Zhu Huihua did not know was that just tonight, 2 other assassination teams had also started to take action. They were the men of sacrifice of the Mu family, led by Muong, and the 100 ninjas, led by Mo Gui. The men of sacrifice of the Mu family, led by Muong, have been lurking in the city for several days, waiting for the right opportunity to take action. There was no doubt about it. Although the Mu family also looked down on Zhu Huihua and would take his life if there was a chance. But in the face of a more powerful opponent, Yang Qindong, they had no choice but to work together to deal with this big problem first. For this reason, Muong has made up his mind to succeed or die trying. Fortunately, after 2 consecutive nights of attack, the outer courtyard of Yang Qindong's residence has been conquered, and the range of activity has been reduced a lot compared to before. Under such conditions, once the men of sacrifice of the Mu family rushed to Yang Qindong's side, they still have a high chance to kill the target and complete the mission. Let's talk about the 100 ninjas, led by Mo Gui. This is a force that no one knows about. Ninjas are best at hiding. In addition to Mo Gui's arrangements, no one noticed them. Even Yang Qindong didn't know about their existence. What's more worth mentioning is that the leader of this group of ninjas is the special ninja who has been on Yang Qindong's death list. This special ninja, who should have died in the assassination of the Timur Empire's General Mendelatu, has now come to Yunnan Mansion without anyone noticing. In the dark, he is like a poisonous snake. Once he sees the opportunity, he will decisively attack and release his powerful energy. These 2 dark forces, one left and one right, stared at the dilapidated small courtyard, waiting for the best opportunity to appear. In the small courtyard, Beta Persei, Dao Xiao, Ba Daojiang, and others were also doing the final inspection. Years of war made them feel as if dark clouds were looming over the city. Everyone knew that the enemy's attack tonight would only be more ferocious compared to the attack of the previous 2 nights. Fortunately, they have enough firearms and ammunition in their hands, which is their strongest confidence. During the day, they have already dug trenches to ensure that the soldiers can hide in them and kill all the enemies under the premise of enough self-protection. Beta Persei leave a gap in the east. It was unknown when Yang Qindong had changed into the golden cloak. Although the sky was turning dark, it was still dazzling. Under the illumination of the remaining light, it emitted a myriad of rays of light, giving people the feeling that he was a god descending to the mortal world. Young master, Beta Persei was surprised when he heard this. Once a gap is opened, it may give the enemy an opportunity to rush into the small courtyard. If that's the case, it will be too dangerous. Execute the order. Yang Qindong didn't explain too much. Of course, he knew what he was doing. This is indeed a little risky. But if he doesn't do this, how can he find the forces hidden in the dark? Moreover, with his Grandmaster-level skills and the large warehouse that he can use at any time, is there really nothing to be afraid of? Perhaps this is the boldness of the skillful. Not to mention, who doesn't have a backup plan? Since it was Yang Qindong's order, regardless of whether Beta Persei is willing or not, he can only carry it out in the end. A gap naturally appeared in the east. However, it is not obvious, at least not at a glance. This is exactly what Yang Qindong needs. If the gap is too obvious, isn't it the same as telling others that this is a trap? The reason why Yang Qindong chose to take the risk this time is to see if he can find the whereabouts of the traitor. If his defense is foolproof, how could the traitor appear? The Black Cavalry, who have long been prepared for a tough battle, checked the weapons in their hands for the last time. The telecommunications director, Wang Shan, also came to Yang Qindong's side and reported the contents of a few telegrams that he just received. Sixth young master, Yao Yingjun, has persuaded Guizhou province General Jiang Wuqing and has now taken over their military power. He has also sent 20,000 troops from Guizhou province to Yunnan prefecture. Sixth young master, after a day and night of long-distance attacks, my main army is now less than 300 miles away from us. They are confident that they will arrive outside Yunnan prefecture before noon yesterday. Sixth young master, the intelligence department has sent news that Guangxi province General Baikuan is now in close contact with the southern Ming imperial court. It seems that there is a possibility of him being instigated at any time. Sixth young master, listening to the contents of the telegrams read out, Yang Qindong calmly looked ahead. He knew that after taking a big detour and eliminating the surrounding dangers one by one, he would finally have to face the southern Ming imperial court. Okay, got it. At this moment, Yang Qindong did not feel too much joy. After all, once the war broke out, the ones who would suffer would be the lowest class of Han people. It would not be like when they attacked other countries and factions, where they could do anything to achieve their goals. Wang Shan seemed to feel that Yang Qindong's mood was a little gloomy, so he quietly left after replying. On the other hand, young heir walked up in confusion and said loudly, "Young master, don't be anxious. With 500 Black Knight dragon guards around, no one will be able to rush up to you and hurt you." Chapter 1575. His originally gloomy mood disappeared without a trace because of Beta Persei's interruption. But it was also at this moment that Yang Qindong thought of telling Beta Persei a few words. Otherwise, with this person's character, he would definitely ruin his grand plan. Beta Persei, if the enemy rushes in from the east later. Young master, I will take them out of here, and you just need to guard this place well. Don't worry about me, understand? Yang Qindong said with a serious look on his face. If it were any other subordinate, he would only need to give an order for the other party to carry it out. But facing Beta Persei, who was a straightforward person, some things had to be said more specifically. Why? Beta Persei wanted to get to the bottom of this, but fortunately he still knew his place and immediately shut his mouth. But this did not mean that he had given up. On the contrary, he said carefully, "Young master, isn't this too dangerous? Why don't you let Dao Shao or Ba Dao Jiang lead the team? I'd better stay by your side." No need. In order to dispel Beta Persei's thoughts and not let him take the risk, Yang Qindong said in a very decisive tone, "It's not like you don't know young master's speed. You can't keep up with me. Okay, just follow orders." Beta Persei's face immediately fell when he heard that he couldn't keep up. In terms of skill and strength, the Yang faction could be considered to be full of talents. Yang heir was considered to be one of the top existences. There were very few people who could convince him to submit. Yang Qindong was an exception. The two of them had exchanged countless moves in private. In the past, they could deal with each other once or twice, but now they could not even last one round against Beta Persei. This made Beta Persei angry and happy at the same time. He was angry because his skills were too weak. He should have been protecting the young master. However, most of the time he had become an existence akin to a decoration. This made him, who boasted that he was strong enough to establish himself with his fists and feet, lose face. He was happy that the young master had such shocking skills. His safety was guaranteed, so he didn't have to worry so much. In terms of skill, he was indeed not on the same level as Yang Qindong. Although he was reluctant, Beta Persei still agreed. "Yes, young master, but you must be careful. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing." Yang Qindong also breathed a sigh of relief. He was really worried that Beta Persei would disregard his orders and follow him. If that was the case, he would not be able to say anything about Beta Persei's loyalty. Now that he was on his own, he didn't have to worry so much. As for his skills, perhaps it was because he had been reborn, or perhaps it was because he had Diker with him. In short, whether it was his speed, strength, or reaction time, his body was indeed frighteningly high. In addition, the battlefield and killing techniques that he had learned in his previous life were there to assist him. Unless it was a close-range attack, as long as he had a little bit of time and opportunity to react, no one would be able to kill him. Because of this, he dared to take such a risk. It was also because of this that he dared to open an opening in the face of tens of thousands of enemies with only 500 black cavalry and set an exposed trap for the people who wanted to harm him. Not to mention, there was still the existence of the backup plan. Just now, Director Wang Shan had reported that the backup plan was in place and that they were prepared at any time. With this, now he just had to wait for the enemy to fall into the trap. Perhaps he could use this opportunity to find out the identity of the traitor. Yang Qindong was ready for battle and made all kinds of preparations. Outside the small courtyard, Wang Zhanjiang led nearly 20,000 troops and was ready to charge. They had already failed for 2 consecutive nights. They had sent out tens of thousands of soldiers and dozens of cannons, but they were still unable to do anything to an army of 500 surrounded. Even though the enemy had advanced firearms, Wang Zhanjiang was still not afraid. No matter how advanced the firearms were, they still needed to be controlled by people. He didn't believe that the enemy would be able to hold on for long under continuous attacks. As long as he had the chance to get close, the human wave tactic would be effective, and it would be time for him to reap the fruits of victory. Once he killed Bugnam of Gojoseon, his reputation would definitely soar. At that time, who would dare to look down on him? When that time came, he would be the #1 hero in the world. With this thought in mind, Wang Zhanjiang felt quite excited, and the tiredness that he had felt for the past few days seemed to have lessened. While he was looking forward to it, the sky finally darkened. Wang Zhanjiang, who couldn't wait any longer, ordered the attack to begin as soon as the sky darkened. Fire arrows flew out one after another and flew towards the surroundings of the small courtyard. In order to ensure that everyone's vision was not obstructed, Wang Zhanjiang changed his strategy of fighting in the dark 2 nights ago. He prepared countless fire arrows in advance in order to illuminate the surroundings and find the weak points of the black cavalry's defense to find the best path to attack. Thousands of fire arrows suddenly flew up and landed around the small courtyard. Under the connected fire, the small courtyard was illuminated as if it was daytime. The trenches dug in the small courtyard also appeared in Wang Zhanjiang's sight. Good strategy, haha. Wang Zhanjiang laughed excitedly as he instantly understood the black cavalry strategy. During the day, the black cavalry used all kinds of methods to conceal themselves and only dug trenches. They only entered the trenches when it was dark. If they continued to attack in the dark, then even if they died in battle, no one would be able to figure out what method the black cavalry used. Now that the trenches were right in front of him, Wang Zhanjiang, who understood everything, had a better plan in mind. Men, prepare to light a fire and release smoke. Smoke attack was one of the most commonly used methods on the battlefield. In history, there were many records of victory through smoke attacks. However, because of the many limitations of this method of attack, although it was a good method, there were not many people who used it. But now the black cavalry was surrounded within a certain range, so using smoke attacks was a good method. Under Wang Zhanjiang's order, the soldiers quickly carried dry firewood and lit it. Then they continued to add wet firewood to the fire. Soon, smoke rose, and under the incessant fanning of the soldiers of the 3 provinces, the smoke began to blow towards the small courtyard. They're going to release smoke. With the help of the night vision device, Ba Daojiang, who was guarding the first line of defense, quickly discovered Wang Zhanjiang's intention. However, he did not panic. On the contrary, the corner of his mouth revealed a disdainful smile. At this moment, if Wang Zhanjiang could stand in front of him, he could not help but scold him for his stupidity. In front of long-range firearms, what was the effect of releasing smoke? Did they not know that all they needed to do was to land a shell on the pile of firewood to solve all the problems? Come on, where are the rocket launchers? Aim them at the pile of firewood and blow it up, Ba Daojiang said with a confident face. The rocket launchers beside him immediately got ready. Before the smoke could completely form, the rocket launchers were already fired at the small courtyard, raising the pile of firewood to the ground. Not only did the smoke not have any effect, but more than 10 people were killed or injured because of the rocket launcher. Wang Zhanjiang frowned. He was very curious about how the enemy could see his movements clearly when the sky was dark and the smoke was thick. Although it was the 16th day of the lunar calendar, the time when the moon was full, he shook his head. Shaking his head, he pushed the unhappiness in his heart to the bottom of his heart. Now was not the time to think about this. There was not much time left for him. If he could not take down Yang Qindong tonight, he was afraid that his head would be removed from his body. Men, beat the drums, charge! Under the illumination of the moonlight, accompanied by the flames everywhere, the soldiers of the 3 provinces began their suicidal charge. Just like a few days ago, the black shadows were everywhere. The soldiers of the 3 provinces pressed forward with a fearless look. Under the supervision of Wang Zhanjiang, the soldiers reluctantly charged forward. Open fire! The 500 black cavalry soldiers were naturally not going to be polite. With a shout, Ba Daojiang, who was in charge of the first line of defense, gave the order to open fire. In fact, after 2 days of fighting, the number of black cavalry soldiers was less than 500. To be precise, 13 soldiers were injured to varying degrees and could no longer participate in the battle. They could only stay in the main courtyard with Yang Qindong. Even so, the 487 black cavalry soldiers were armed with all kinds of advanced firearms. They were like a piece of metal, preventing the soldiers of the 3 provinces from approaching from all directions. Dense gunshots rang out, and the black shadows fell one by one. This battle made everyone realize the importance of weapons. When the weapons were advanced to a certain extent, it was already impossible to make up for it with manpower. The gunshots continued, and the casualties of the 3 provinces continued to increase. When the news reached the ears of General Wang Zhanjiang, he was calm like an old monk and did not even frown. All of this was within his expectations. Although he did not understand where the black cavalry got the firearms and ammunition, he had no choice. In a battle of life and death, in order to give Zhu Huihua an explanation, even if he had to sacrifice all of his soldiers. So what? As long as he could get rid of Yang Qindong, all of this was worth it in his eyes. A general success was built on thousands of bones. At this moment, there was a clear reflection of the cruelty of war. Wang Zhanjiang personally supervised the battle. If any soldier wanted to retreat out of fear, once discovered, they would be killed without mercy. In this kind of battle where they would die regardless of whether they rushed forward or retreated, the soldiers had no choice. After getting used to obeying orders, they could only hope that they would be lucky enough to break through the blockade of the black cavalry and rush into the small courtyard. The soldiers of the 3 provincial armies, who had no other choice, showed the madness that they should have when they only had one path left to charge. Although the number of dead and injured soldiers kept increasing, after paying a huge price, they finally got closer and closer to the defending Black Knight Dragon Guards. When they were within an arrow's range, all kinds of bows and arrows began to fly, and the pressure began to increase. Chapter 1576. What's going on? Beat them back. Don't let any arrows threaten us. More and more arrows rained down on the trenches. Some of the black cavalry soldiers had already been hit by arrows. Although none of them were killed, more than a dozen soldiers were injured. Some of them even had their arms injured. This made it impossible for them to continue using their firearms in a short period of time. As Ba Daojiang shouted, a look of indignation appeared on his face. However, he didn't have a better idea. Tonight, the soldiers of the 3 provinces were rushing over without regard for their lives. Although the firearms in their hands were very powerful, they had limited manpower. There were less than 500 people, and they needed to guard the 4 directions. It was destined that the counterattack they could make was very limited. Fire 2 waves of grenades in a row. Beat back the enemies that are close to us. Captain Howling Blade had somehow arrived at Badao River and started shouting. Then, a wave of grenades was thrown in all directions. Cries of agony were heard one after another. Many of the soldiers from the 3 provinces who wanted to approach them were killed. The situation was stabilized again. Sigh. A heavy punch fell from the sky. Seeing that they were charging fearlessly, the opportunity to defeat the enemy had appeared. However, it was indeed a pity that they had failed because of a wave of grenades. However, Wang Zhanjiang wasn't discouraged. Since they had the opportunity just now, he believed that they would have a second chance if they continued to charge. He continued to give orders. The entire army charged forward without stopping. The battle in the inner circle was in full swing. Outside the small courtyard, the sound of gunfire and cannons had attracted more and more civilians. The appearance of the civilians wasn't that sudden. After all, the same sound had been heard for 2 consecutive nights. Anyone who wasn't deaf could hear it. The difference was that although these people were worried for the first 2 nights, they didn't do anything. But now the civilians were making a move. From all directions, more than 15,000 civilians rushed towards the small courtyard. General Cai Wenjiu, who was in charge of the security of the outer circle, didn't look nervous at all. Perhaps this was due to inertia. In front of the army, the civilians were just livestock that could be driven around at will. Men, set up the formation. Archers, get ready. If the commoners dare to come close, shoot them down. Cai Wenjiu, who was riding on his horse, said calmly. Compared to the civilians who didn't have much fighting power, he was much more fortunate than Wang Zhanjiang, who could die at any moment in the inner circle. Cai Wenjiu had a calm expression on his face, but if he knew that 1/10 of the 20,000 soldiers under him were cold vanguard warriors and thousands of new recruits had already been convinced by the cold vanguard warriors, he would not be able to remain so calm. As the saying goes, to catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. Cai Wenjiu didn't know that he had already become someone's target. Cheng Hu, the commander of the Cold Front Army's 1st Division and 1st Regiment, was currently hiding in the army, watching Cai Wenjiu's every move. Anyone who had been in the army knew that one was always the most powerful existence in an army. For example, in a company, if a company's 1st-grade officer died in battle, then the one to inherit their position would definitely be a platoon leader. Logically speaking, if the platoon-level officers all died in battle, the one who would inherit their positions would definitely be the platoon leader. This clearly showed the importance of this platoon leader. For Cheng Hu to be able to become the commander of an army's 1st Division and 1st Regiment, his ability was naturally not to be underestimated. Since he had his eyes on Cai Wenjiu, how could he escape from Cheng Hu's grasp when the enemy was in the open and Cai Wenjiu was in the dark? Attack! Seeing that the commoners were getting closer and closer, and that many of the soldiers from the 3 provinces had already started to knock their arrows, Cheng Hu, as the commander, shouted loudly. He drew his scimitar and charged towards Cai Wenjiu on his horse. With a shout, hundreds of cold vanguard warriors also drew their scimitars and charged towards Cai Wenjiu. They only had one target, General Cai Wenjiu on his horse. The formation suddenly became chaotic. Many of the soldiers from the 3 provinces didn't know what was going on. They only felt people charging past them, and if anyone dared to stop them, they would quickly be knocked to the ground and never be able to get up again. This sudden turn of events left many of the soldiers of the 3 provinces scratching their heads in confusion. Before they could figure out what was going on, Cai Wenjiu, who was riding on the horse, had his head chopped off. Blood sprayed everywhere. Cheng, whose personal strength was naturally unquestionable. Just the number of cold vanguard warriors and officers trained by him, numbered more than 1,000. Having fought with countless people, he had long trained himself to be invincible in close combat. Coupled with the fact that he was unprepared, it would be strange if Cai Wenju could escape. Without even having the time to react, the commander of the troops, Cai Wenju, was killed on his horse. When the other soldiers from the 3 provinces saw this scene, all of them turned pale with fright. More importantly, the person who killed the general was wearing the same uniform as them. This was the most frightening and inexplicable thing. Why did the soldiers dare to kill the general? If these people dared to kill the general, would they also dare to kill them? Put down your weapons and kneel on the ground. Otherwise, you will be killed without mercy. Waves of shouts came out one after another. More and more recruits with red cloth wrapped around their arms jumped out and shouted. The united front work done before finally played a decisive role at this moment. Cheng, whose sudden attack and the active cooperation of his 4 battalion commanders, including Feng Zhan and Wang Jinlong, made the soldiers from the 3 provinces squat on the ground in confusion. Although they still didn't know what was going on, one thing was clear. If they didn't drop their weapons and squat on the ground now, they would die. This had been proven by the fact that their comrades had been killed for no reason just now. There were more and more civilians on the periphery, and the soldiers from the 3 provinces were getting closer and closer. Although there were nearly 100 spies from the Security Bureau encouraging everyone to act as the mainstay, when the soldiers from the 3 provinces were getting closer and closer, many civilians couldn't help but slow down. They were civilians and hadn't received any relevant military training. When facing regular soldiers with armor and swords, it would be a lie to say that they weren't nervous. But when they thought that if Bugnam of Gojoseon died in Yunnan Prefecture, the 5-star army would definitely take revenge. At that time, they would also be unable to escape death. Their confidence was strengthened a lot, and they didn't seem to be as scared as before. What's going on? Why isn't anyone shooting at us? Yeah, why do I see that many of these soldiers are squatting down? The distance was getting closer and closer. When they were less than 30 steps away, the civilians at the front finally saw the movements of the soldiers from the 3 provinces. The spies mixed in the crowd played a role at this time. Thinking of what the director said before, that someone would cooperate with them, how could they not know what was going on? Immediately, one by one, they shouted in the crowd, "The soldiers are mutinous. They are on the same side as us. Now, let's go with them and rescue Bugnam of Gojoseon." As soon as such shouts appeared, they rose and fell one after another without end. All the spies in the crowd also shouted in all directions, hoping to convey this fact to the ears of every civilian so that they could move forward without worry. The fact that there were no arrows from afar was enough to explain everything. After knowing that the soldiers were like them and didn't want anything to happen to Bugnam of Gojoseon, the number of soldiers increased by a lot. They were no longer afraid, and each of them moved faster than before. There was a mutiny on the outside, and it wouldn't be long before it affected the inside. Under the attack from both sides, Wang Zhanjiang's fate was already sealed, and Yang Qindong's safety would naturally be guaranteed. It was at this time that Yang Qindong, to everyone's surprise, broke out from the east alone in a golden cloak. His body was like a fox, and he was as fast as a cheetah. This was the true portrayal of Yang Qindong's current situation. In the darkness, the golden cloak shone like a beacon. After he rushed out, he was locked on by many eyes. Golden cloak, that must be Bugnam of Gojoseon. Go after him. In the darkness, Muong, who was paying close attention to everything, like a viper lurking in the dark, had a flash of excitement in his eyes. He naturally saw the intensity of the battle just now. When he saw how the black cavalry relied on the advanced firearms in their hands to repel the attacks of the 3 provincial armies again and again, he was anxious and uneasy. After observing the battlefield, Muong came to the east. In his opinion, the defense here seemed to be weaker. If he had to launch an attack, he would definitely choose to attack here. Hiding in the east, he didn't know if the three provincial armies could break through the Black Cavalry's defense line if this continued. If they couldn't, once Yang Qindong walked out alive, who could restrain him? Where could they find such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Yang Qindong must die, otherwise he would have to go and die. This was the military order he gave to his uncle, Ping Shiwangmu Bin, before he came. With the military order in front of him, Mu Ong was still thinking about whether to launch an attack in the chaos. The men he brought were men of sacrifice, trained by the Mu family with great effort. In terms of skills, they were naturally not comparable to the ordinary soldiers of the three provincial armies. Even so, he was not 100% confident that he could bring 200 men of sacrifice to the Black Cavalry. While he was still struggling in his heart and unable to make a final decision, Yang Qindong rushed out, especially when the other party deliberately stopped in the process of charging. With the help of the moon, they could see his face clearly. Needless to say, Mu Ong was excited. Chapter 1577. He thought that this mission would be very difficult to complete, and the 200 men he brought with him would be thrown here. He never thought that Yang Qindong would actually rush out. Could it be that the Black Cavalry's defensive line was no longer safe? It's just that this is not what Mu Ong should care about now. What he needs to do now is to catch up with Yang Qindong and kill him. Having seen the portrait of Yang Qindong countless times, Mu Ong believed that he would not recognize the wrong person. Therefore, after Yang Qindong, who was wearing a golden cloak, rushed out from the east and kept running away, Mu Ong took him and 200 men under him like ghosts in the night and chased after Yang Qindong. As soon as Mu Ong moved, in the same darkness, the 100 ninjas also moved. For Yang Qindong's appearance and figure, even if he turned into ashes, Bujishi could not forget it. So in just a face-to-face, Bujishi could be 100% sure that the person who escaped was Yang Qindong. Even so, how could he let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Yang Qindong appeared, and he was still alone. His appearance also directly attracted the pursuit of 200 men of the Mu family and 100 ninjas. Besides, at this time Yang Qindong, with the idea of being bold, rushed out from the protection of the Black Cavalry. The reason why he did this was that he wanted to lure the enemy into the trap, and secondly, doing this could also reduce the pressure on the Black Cavalry so that he could go all out and fight without any scruples. It's just that when he really rushed out, Yang Qindong was not sure whether someone would chase after him or not. It wasn't until he met the soldiers of the three provinces who were charging at him from the outside, and used his body to quickly weave through them, that he heard the dense footsteps behind him. Only then did a relaxed smile appear on his face. With Yang Qindong's current skill, his hearing was naturally better than ordinary people. Just from the sound of those footsteps, he could feel that the strength of the people who came was definitely not comparable to the ordinary soldiers of the three provinces. From the orderly and light footsteps, Yang Qindong could feel that the other party's breathing was very stable. They should be the work of a well-trained master. Thinking that these people were masters, Yang Qindong couldn't help but rejoice in his actions. If it wasn't for this risk, the killers who waited for a long time and didn't have a chance to attack the small courtyard together with the soldiers of the three provinces. If so, the loss of the Black Cavalry would be inevitable. Haha, come on. I hope you can keep up with my speed. After a smile that others couldn't see flashed across the corner of Yang Qindong's mouth, he stomped his feet on the ground and rushed forward again. With only 50% of his strength, Yang Qindong could keep a safe distance from the pursuers behind him. Yang Qindong led the way in front without any hurry. Behind him were the men of sacrifice led by Mu Ong and the ninjas led by Chueisho. As the two sides chased and fled, the distance between them and the small courtyard was getting farther and farther. Keep an eye on him, don't let him run away. Mu Ong was very excited at this time. When he spoke, he looked back, and then his eyes flashed with helplessness. Unlike Yang Qindong's skill, he could rush out of the encirclement of the three provinces without any injuries. When he led his men to break out of the encirclement, it took him some effort. The moment he collided with the soldiers of the 3 provinces, both sides were entangled for a short period of time. After sacrificing the lives of several men of sacrifice, he finally managed to kill his way out. This was because the soldiers of the 3 provinces were not prepared in the dark. Otherwise, Muong didn't dare to think about how many of the 200 men of sacrifice could escape alive. Now that several people have died, and all of this will fall on Yang Chendong's head, Muang's killing intent was even stronger at this time. Chuaishou, who was 1 step behind them, was not any better. Just now, after a fierce battle, after losing the lives of several ninjas, they were able to rush out. Although they were reinforcements invited by Zhu Huihua, before their identity was announced, ordinary soldiers of the 3 provinces didn't know who they were. If they met on the battlefield, they were either comrades or enemies. Several ninjas died before they could catch up with the main character. Chuaishou was also angry, but when he thought that he could finally catch Yang Chendong, his mood became excited again. He knew the importance of this battle. It will indicate whether the ninjas can be independent of Yang Xie and whether they have the opportunity to rebuild the small Japanese empire. And for this great goal, even if they use all their strength, even if they lose their lives, it is worth it. Both of them looked like they would not give up until they achieved their goal. The 2 teams followed Yang Chendong's footsteps closely and weaved through the southern cloud manor. Yang Chendong, who was walking in front, was undoubtedly the most relaxed person. If he wanted to, with his strength, he could easily get rid of the tail behind him. But he didn't do that. He wanted to see if there was a second force that wanted to take his life. In this way, one side fled, while the other chased for about half an hour. Even when Yang Chendong felt tired, he still didn't find any new enemies. He knew that the dark forces in Yunnan Mansion were only these. He looked at the direction and went to the Xingwang Temple in the east of the city. Xingwang Temple, in the great Ming dynasty at that time, almost every town had one. It represented a kind of sustenance for the people. As the Xingwang Temple of Yunnan Mansion, it covered a large area. It was equivalent to the size of a courtyard, and it was protected by a courtyard wall. It had its own independent courtyard. This was the cemetery Yang Chendong prepared for the people chasing behind him, and it was also the place where Yang Chendong prepared a backup plan. Just now he had passed by it twice. He believed that the people who had been lying in ambush must have made all kinds of preparations. It was time to close the net. When he came to the Xingwang Temple again, Yang Chendong flashed and jumped in the wall. His whole person disappeared into the darkness like a ghost. Following behind him were Muong and the others. Several men with good body skills also flew up, grabbed the courtyard wall, and jumped in. Soon the door was opened from the inside, and more men rushed in from the door. Nearly 200 men rushed into the Xingwang Temple with the fastest speed, which made Ishiki, who followed closely behind, couldn't help but stop. He only stopped for a few seconds, and then he rushed in with nearly 100 ninjas. "Who are you people?" As soon as they entered the courtyard, a group of men turned around and surrounded Ishiki and the others. The ninjas were not willing to be outdone, and they all held their ninja swords in their hands, ready to fight at any time. During the pursuit, Muong knew that there was another group of pursuers behind him. However, he didn't know who these people were, so he didn't pay attention to them. After all, killing Yang Chendong was the most important task. But now, the 2 sides finally collided, and it was time for an explanation. "Don't be nervous. We are also looking for Bugnam of Gojoseon to take his life." Ishiki stepped forward and looked at Muong, who was nervous. This wasn't because Ishiki was afraid of Muong. In this dark night, although he didn't have the number of people, he was confident that he could win. It's just that he didn't forget that Yang Chendong was his target, and he didn't want to complicate things before that. How could Muong not think the same way? Although he didn't know the strength of his opponents, he didn't see them coming. However, when they saw him, they did not immediately attack him. This proved everything. They weren't Yang Chendong's subordinates, and with this, he won't be an enemy before completing the mission. Well, I will believe you for the time being. Now Yang Chendong is in this Xing Wang temple. Let's look for him carefully. Mu Ong stopped his men from attacking and turned around to go inside the Xing Wang temple. He had already arranged people to guard outside the temple. If Yang Chendong wanted to escape, he wouldn't be able to escape from his eyes. The two groups of people were divided into several teams, and they began to slowly move forward. They went to one temple after another, and it seemed like they were going to turn this place upside down to find Yang Chendong. In the dark, Yang Chendong's eyes had already been put on the most advanced night vision goggles, and he was watching Muong and his Shiki slowly approaching him. At this moment, Yang Chendong's eyes were filled with an inexhaustible anger, all because he saw Ishiki. Although the other party was dressed in black at this time, and there was a black mask on his face, but just like the other party could easily recognize him, he also recognized the other party. Ishiki is dead. He died in the assassination of Mandalatu. This is a well-known thing in Yangxia. But no one would have thought that in order to deter the world, Manto Rata hung all the assassins on the wooden pole to warn the world. Because of this action, the secret agents of the Security Bureau carefully examined the corpses, but they didn't find the leader of the ninja clan, Kuroshio Shinobi. When this information was reported to Yang Chendong, he was a little more vigilant. For this reason, he has taken some precautions, but at that time Yang Chendong was still optimistic that Ishiki might have been burned, or he might have escaped with serious injuries and died. After all, he is a special ninja, and his strength is not comparable to ordinary people. This was just a kind of hope. However, when Chue Shi appeared in the Xing Wang temple, Yang Chendong knew that he had been too optimistic. This person is not dead, and he wants to kill him, thinking that if he didn't save him, Ishiki would have died, and there would be no ninja today. And it was his own kindness that led to all of this. The anger in his heart couldn't be extinguished. Yang Chendong hates betrayal. Especially after betrayal, they want to harm him. With this, there will be no good result for Ishiki today. Chapter 1578. Get ready to do it. In the end, Yang Chendong shook his head. He knew that those were just memories. Now, it was time to make up his mind to eradicate all of this. Yang Chendong, who seemed to have made some kind of decision, walked out of the darkness wearing a golden robe. As soon as he appeared, the death warriors of the Mu family and the Japanese ninjas who were searching for him couldn't help but exclaim. And then everyone quickly rushed forward and surrounded him. With the help of the torch in his hand, the entire courtyard of the Xing Wang temple was illuminated, and Yang Chendong's face also appeared in everyone's eyes. When he saw that it was indeed Yang Chendong, Muong was overjoyed. Previously, he had been worried that the person chasing him was fake and that he would fall for a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. But now he could let go of his worries. On the other side, Blowing Stone, who was wearing a night suit, frowned. The person who came is Yang Chendong, and he is confident that he won't be wrong. But because of this, he couldn't help but mutter in his heart, the other party shouldn't have come out. 1 against 300, and such elite 300 people. Even if they were made of iron, they wouldn't be their opponents. But why did he know that? Why did he come out? Why? Thinking of Yang Chendong's various means before, especially the last time when Ivan's sneak attack failed, and even the 30,000 cavalry, led by Yes Hen, were destroyed. Blowing Stone's face suddenly became ugly. Could it be that this is a trap set by Yang Chendong? When he thought of Yang Chendong's past, for some reason, Blowing Stone had a feeling of panic. Although he glanced around and didn't find anything wrong, he was still very nervous at the moment. Unlike Yang Chendong's men, Muong at this moment appeared in front of Yang Chendong as a winner. Oh, this should be King Wunan of Damyong. I'm Muong of the Mu family. I've been waiting for a long time. The Mu family of Sheeping King? Yang Chendong wasn't surprised when he heard this. He just repeated it and chuckled. Then he didn't pay any more attention to the other party. Instead, he looked at the area under the rock. What? Friend, are you not going to introduce yourself? Even if you want my life, You should at least let me know who you are, right? Yang Qindong was so calm that people who didn't know would think that this was his home ground. So when they heard this, many of the Mu family's death warriors and ninjas showed resentment on their faces. As ordinary ninjas, although they know that they once worked for Yang Xia, they don't know that everything they need for training, such as food, clothing, shelter, transportation, etc., was provided by Yang Qindong. They thought that the upper echelons had no choice but to lower their heads and submit to others in order to survive. In fact, several special ninjas like Kurosawa also said this to the people below. This caused everyone to look at Yang Qindong without the slightest bit of gratitude, only murderous intent and anger. But Chuisho is different from ordinary people. He knows everything. When he saw Yang Qindong's eyes looking at him, he knew that the other party already knows his identity, otherwise he wouldn't question him in such a tone. When he thought about how he relied on Yang Qindong to develop and even lived until now, and it was because of Yang Qindong's help he felt short of breath. Facing this question, he naturally didn't know how to answer. Chuisho didn't speak immediately, which caused Yang Qindong to laugh. What's wrong? Could it be that all of you are mute? Or are you too ashamed to say your name and identity? Yang Qindong deliberately said these words in Japanese. This is also his way of telling Chuisho that this king has already recognized his identity, and there is no point in hiding it anymore. Baka! What is he talking about? Is he looking down on us ninjas? At this time, those ninjas have already exploded. Their dignity will never allow others to judge them like this. But they also know the importance of respect. At this moment, after most of the ninjas vented their dissatisfaction, they still looked at Chuisho. They want him to speak for them. He even spoke in Japanese. Chuisho knew that his identity has already been exposed. It's just that at this moment he was no longer afraid. Since he made such a choice, he must bear the consequences. So before he came, he was prepared to die, although he didn't think that this trip would be dangerous. After taking a deep breath and calming down, Chuisho finally spoke. Bugnam of Gojoseon, long time no see. I am a special ninja of the Japanese Empire, Chuisho. It turned out to be a ninja, Muong, who saw everything from the side. Couldn't help but be surprised. But soon this surprise was suppressed in the bottom of his heart. This time, he didn't want to be enemies with ninjas, but to kill Yang Qindong. As long as he can complete this task, it's just a small ninja whose country has been destroyed. He really doesn't put him in his eyes. You finally dare to admit your identity? But why don't you call yourself a servant? And what Japanese empire did you say? Wasn't it destroyed a long time ago? Now it's just a province of Yangxia. Yang Qindong waited for Chuisho to admit his identity. Then he couldn't help but laugh. His words were full of sarcasm and contempt. In the past, these ninjas under the rock claimed to be slaves in front of Yang Qindong, and even if he wanted, these people claimed to be lackeys. But now, these small titles proved their ambition. In the face of these sarcastic words, the other ninjas who understood Chinese naturally couldn't stand it. They all looked at Chuisho angrily. Chuisho wasn't much better if it was just him and Yang Qindong here. He would just listen to some of these words. But now there are so many ninjas here, he absolutely won't allow anyone to question and disrespect him. So at this moment he suddenly shouted back, Bugnam of Gojoseon, the past is the past. Please speak with dignity. Dignity, Ba. Yang Qindong opened his mouth and spat. A group of people who are willing to be dogs in order to survive. You want others to respect you. You think too highly of yourselves. Let me tell you, a dog is a dog, even if it's wearing clothes. It's just a pet called by the master. In the face of a master who gives you food and drinks, you have to learn to wag your tail and beg, not to be treated with equal respect, like a human, because you don't deserve it. After saying these words, it didn't seem to be enough. Yang Qindong continued to say, If it wasn't for this king, you would already be dead. How could you have your current scale? Without this king's money, how could you recruit people and train them wholeheartedly? Do you really think you can deny everything just because you've eaten everything? Facing Yang Qindong's questioning, Chuosho opened his mouth several times to say something, but in the end he didn't say anything. Yang Qindong was right. If it wasn't for his pity and help, they would have already been killed by the samurai of the Japanese Empire. They wouldn't have been able to survive until now, let alone develop and grow stronger. They were once their benefactors, but now they don't want to repay him, they want to kill their master. What they did was indeed a bit too much. After venting for a while, Yang Qindong's mood seemed to be better. He opened his mouth and said, "All right, let the past go with the wind. Since you have chosen to be enemies with this king, then there's no meaning in saying those things. Now that you have found this king and want to kill this king, can you tell me who ordered you to do this? Oh, don't say no. If you want to train ninjas without enough money, it's impossible. Don't try to fool this king." With a change of topic, Yang Qindong placed the question on the person behind the scenes. This was also the answer that Yang Qindong desperately wanted to know. Wasn't the reason why he took such a risk on this trip for this answer to find out who the traitor was? Yang Qindong didn't mention the past. He just wanted to know who ordered them to do it. This request was already very low. Before a prisoner died, they were allowed to eat a full meal, not to mention Yang Qindong, who was their benefactor. But he just wanted to know who was behind the scenes. This was not too much. If Chuoshiki knew the answer, he would tell Yang Qindong. But unfortunately, he really didn't know. Chuoshiki shook his head. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, it's not that Chuoshiki doesn't want to tell you. I really don't know. I only know to listen to Emo Gue's orders." Emo Gue? Who is he? Although Yang Qindong was somewhat dissatisfied with this answer, he also knew that Chuoshiki really didn't know, otherwise he wouldn't refuse to answer this question. "I don't know who he is. I just know everything. I just listen to him. By the way, he should be in the palace of the 3 provinces now, beside the 3 provincial kings. It's a pity. I'm afraid that Bugnam of Gojoseon will never see him again," Chuoshiki said while shaking his head, as if he was going to die here today. He was destined to not know the result. "Emo Gue, right? I'll remember this name." Yang Qindong nodded heavily, as if he attached great importance to this name. Seeing that Yang Qindong was still hesitating about this matter, seeing that Chuoshiki seemed to have answered his question, and seeing that it was getting late, Muong laughed loudly. "Well, Bugnam of Gojoseon, you should know everything you need to know. Now you shouldn't have any last wishes. It's time to go on the road." "Go on the road? With just you? You're just a small child of the Mu family. Do you know that I'm Bugnam of Gojoseon, the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, recognized by the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, Bai Ming, and the emperor of the Southern Ming Dynasty? Do you know that you're offending your superiors by doing this to me?" Seeing that Chuoshiki couldn't ask any more questions, Yang Qindong turned his gaze to Muong. Chapter 1579. Muong had never experienced Yang Qindong's methods. He had only heard about them, so Muong was not afraid of him. Seeing that Yang Qindong still wanted to use his position to oppress others, Muong could not help but burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha, Bugnam of Gojoseon? The emperor personally conferred the title? Don't you think it's ridiculous to say this? Don't you know that all this is because you were forced to do so? You're just a courtier. Instead of thanking the emperor for his kindness, you only want to rebel and become the emperor. Now you still have the face to talk about these principles. Don't you feel ashamed?" Muong's scolding attracted a burst of cheers from the men of sacrifice around him. Although they had not made a move yet, it was obvious that their young master Mu was much better than the special ninja of the Japanese Empire. This was something they should be proud of. Yang Qindong listened to all this carefully, and there was no trace of unhappiness on his face. This was because he knew that Muong wasn't the only one who thought this way. Most of the officials of the Great Ming Dynasty were also thinking this way. This was everyone's intuition about him. He really needed to understand it. It was a pity that Muong's eloquence was only SO. After saying this, he shut up. Perhaps he was disappointed that he did not see Yang Qindong flying into a rage, so he lost interest. Why don't you continue? Yang Qindong, on the other hand, didn't seem to have heard enough and asked such a question. This really angered Muong. He had never seen such a thick-skinned person. For a moment, he did not know what to say. He simply did not answer. Instead, he clenched the long sword in his hand and shouted, "What's there to say to a dying man?" "Oh, I see." Yang Qindong nodded as if he understood, but then shook his head. "I gave you a chance to vent your dissatisfaction. If you don't want to say it, then there's really no chance. However, I have to warn you that your actions will bring disaster to the entire Mu family and Sheeping King. I hope you won't regret it when you meet in the netherworld." "Regret? You should be the one regretting it. At the very least, you should die before us." "Men, do it." Muong didn't want to say anything else. Perhaps because he couldn't see Yang Qindong's fear, Muong felt that it was unnecessary to say anything. It would be better to take him down and cut him into 1,000 pieces. "That's right, we should do it. Do it." As Muong's voice fell, Yang Qindong actually nodded in agreement and then said the same thing. "Ah!" Then, the sound of a dying person wailing could be heard. This voice made Muong and Baoshi, who were about to make a move, freeze. They couldn't help but stop moving forward. Bang! The closed door of the temple behind them was suddenly knocked open from the outside. Then, a group of black figures jumped in and blocked the direction of the door. Not only that, at the same time on the courtyard wall, a group of men in black rushed out from behind Yang Qindong. As soon as they appeared, they surrounded Muong and Baoshi. The sudden change shocked Muong and Chue Ishida. Their expressions were no longer as relaxed as before. The men of sacrifice sent by the Mu family were all very strong. If they were fighting on the battlefield, any one of them would not be afraid of 3 to 5 people. But those shouts just now were so quick that they almost didn't hear any sound of resistance. They were killed one after another. From this point of view, doesn't it mean that this person's skills were more powerful than theirs? The stronger the enemy, the more dangerous their situation would be. It would be strange if they didn't have a good expression. The only thing worth rejoicing over was that although it seemed like they were surrounded, it was clear that not many people had come. There were only a little over 100 people, which was not even half of their number. It seemed that with the advantage of numbers, they still had a fighting chance. Seemingly at the same time, Muong and Blowing Stone's eyes met. Then, almost at the same time, they opened their mouths and said the word "kill." They were fast, but some people were faster than them. Those men in black who suddenly appeared, they didn't know when they had the 95 style gun in their hands. Just when those men of sacrifice and ninjas were about to move, a black muzzle was pointed at them, and then there was a burst of fierce gunshots. The bullets flashed in the dark night, and ninjas and men of sacrifice who wanted to rush forward were shot down one by one. Firearms. When they saw the men in black took out these things, whether it was Muong or Baoshi, their face changed. A strong sense of crisis also pressed down on them, making their originally confident faces lose their confidence. Retreat. Go. Almost one after the other, Baoshi and Muong gave the order. In their view, although they had the advantage in numbers, in the face of powerful firearms, it was too difficult to win. In that case, it was better to escape first. Anyway, Yang Qindong was still in Yunnan Mansion, so they didn't have to worry about not finding an opportunity to kill him. It's just that at this time they still wanted to retreat, but it was not so easy. A smoke bomb was thrown at them. The strong smoke exuded a nauseating smell, and their eyes couldn't help but shed tears of pain. In a short time, most people were hit and lost the ability to resist. Throw the flash bomb. Another voice came out, followed by a series of hand grenades that could blind people's eyes. They were thrown in the courtyard, making those men of sacrifice who wanted to escape in the dark, especially the ninjas, have no choice but to stop. Forget about the men of sacrifice. Their advantage was that they were not afraid of death. When their strength was obviously inferior, they were just like straws that could be harvested at any time. Ninjas were different. What they were good at was hiding or sneaking or running away with the help of various means. Whether it was using the surrounding environment or the reflection and refraction of light. In short, when it came to escaping, few people dared to say that they were the best. Not to mention in the originally dark environment, as long as they couldn't be killed in the first place. Once they escaped, it would be extremely difficult to catch them. It was precisely because they knew and understood this that those flash bombs were thrown out. When a strong light suddenly came out and met the eyes of those ninjas, at that moment they felt that there was a vast expanse of white in front of them. At this moment, they completely lost their direction, let alone escape. When the flash bombs appeared, the men in black with special goggles moved. They had been trained for this for a long time, and with the protection of the goggles, the flash bomb's damage to them has been minimized. One side couldn't see anything, and the other side's vision was normal, so it was easy to imagine what would happen. The sound of gunshots came out, hitting the legs of the men of sacrifice or ninjas one after another. Soon, the Xing Wang temple was dyed red with blood, and a burst of fishy smell also assailed their nostrils, making them want to vomit. Vomit. Those assassins who first experienced the smoke bombs, then the flash bombs, and then the smell of blood, finally couldn't stand it anymore. They began to bend down, lowered their heads, and vomited. But even if they had lost the power to resist in a short time, the gunshots still didn't stop. One by one, their legs were penetrated by bullets and blood flowed out. One by one, they couldn't stand still and fell to the ground. In a short time, the assassins who wanted to resist and break out of the encirclement stopped moving. They fell to the ground one by one, wailing and screaming. At the same time, their bodies were twitching. They didn't know if it was because of the gunshot wounds or because of the smell in their noses. They kept twisting their bodies in pain. Control them all. Seeing that the dust had settled, the group of black-clothed men stopped. One by one, they lit up their torches and began to walk towards the injured assassins on the ground. Fight them to the death. When a black-clothed man came to the side of a death warrior, a sudden shout resounded. Then a figure endured the pain from his legs and suddenly pounced on him like a ferocious tiger coming down from the mountain. His momentum was extraordinary. "You're courting death." The man in black with a torch in his right hand seemed to have expected this scene to happen. He just moved his body to the side and dodged the tiger's attack. Then, when the assassin's figure missed, a torch hit the assassin's back. Under the powerful force, the assassin spat out another mouthful of blood. This time he completely fainted. This scene continued to happen. Men of sacrifice were men of sacrifice. They kept fighting back. Although they had lost the support of their legs, they still fought back. However, those men in black all seemed to have unique skills. Not only were none of them injured, but they all used a single move to subdue the killers who were still unwilling to give up. Once again, they knocked them unconscious on the ground. Among them, the most obvious one was the man in black, who fought against Muong. Muong was allowed to lead the team. Needless to say, his skills were excellent. Therefore, although his legs were penetrated by bullets just now, he did not give up the last chance. When he endured the pain in his legs, he jumped up and rushed toward the man in black. He was full of confidence that his sneak attack would succeed. Although he did this, he still could not avoid the result of death. But it was probably the best result to be able to drag one of them down with him before he died. Although it was said that it would be faster if it was late, when he really attacked, Muong was disappointed again. The moment he flew up, he felt that something was wrong. Then he found that in the face of his absolute counterattack, his opponent did not panic. He even saw the disdain in his opponent's eyes under the moonlight. Then, facing his fierce attack, his opponent did not dodge. On the contrary, his opponent met his attack head-on with his left fist without a torch. Chapter 1580. Logically speaking, it was a good thing that the opponent didn't dodge. But for some reason, Muong had a bad feeling in his heart. Soon, his feeling became reality. The fist collided with his body, and then he felt his whole body fall apart as if he was electrocuted. Then he fell to the ground and fainted. But before he fainted, Muong vaguely saw a big foot stepping on his head. He didn't know what would happen next, nor did he have time to think about it, because he had already closed his eyes in pain. Okay, violent ape, this person's identity is important. We can't let him die now. A shout rang out behind him. Only then did the black-clothed man stop his foot that was about to land. Then he fiercely stomped to the side, forcefully creating a shallow pit in the ground. Only then did he continue to walk forward, completing his mission of investigating the enemy. Sixth young master, Violent Ape, is like this. He was born with great strength and a bad temper, but fortunately he didn't ruin anything. Silver Hand wiped the sweat on his forehead and said nervously to Yang Qindong, "It's okay as long as he doesn't die. Even if he does die, it's okay." Yang Qindong shrugged indifferently. This time, his backup plan was the soldiers of the Wolf Fong Special Forces. Over the years, the development of the Wolf Fong Special Forces wasn't fast. It could even be described as slow, but their strength was really terrifying. They spent most of their time on training, and their strength was terrifying. If it was just a one-on-one, even the black cavalry wouldn't be their opponent. It was precisely because of the high intensity of training that they were very strict when recruiting people, so the development speed wasn't fast. But their overall combat strength was really tyrannical. This time, Yang Qindong gave them an early order to hide in Yunnan Manor and wait for orders. Yang Qindong had a large warehouse, but he wasn't a reckless person. In order to be foolproof, he had double insurance before entering the city. For example, there was the Cold Front First Army's 1st Division's 1st Regiment lurking in the 3 Provincial Armies recruit camp, and there were nearly 300 Wolf Fong Special Forces members. Although there weren't many of them in total, they were the most powerful of them all. Since they were going to turn the enemy's stomach upside down, they would naturally choose quality over quantity. This time, there were a total of 130 Special Forces members who appeared at the Xing Wang Temple. Each of them could fight against 10 or even dozens of people. They were well prepared and equipped with the most advanced firearms. It was only 300 assassins, and they could easily wipe them out. If it wasn't for the fact that he had to keep some of them alive to interrogate them, he would have finished off all of them with just 1 round of gunfire. Then again, even Mu Eng's counterattack was easily blocked. What was the use of the others struggling? It was as if Blowstone had also launched a counterattack. His opponent was Steel Leg, unable to use the ninja's concealment jutsu. In just 3 rounds, he was kicked in the right arm. The bones in his arm were shattered and he fainted, under the encirclement of 130 Wolf Fong members. No one who resisted had a good ending. Those who underestimated the enemy were seriously injured and fainted. Those who were seriously injured were directly killed. It was a clean and quick death. Yang Qindong stopped paying attention to what was happening on the battlefield after he saw the members of Wolf Fong attacking so cleanly and efficiently. Since the people who should be lured out had been lured out, there was no need for him to hide any strength. It was also time to counterattack. Silver Hand, where is your captain? Reporting to the 6th young master, the captain is leading people to the periphery of the 3 provinces' king's mansion. He is just waiting for the order to enter the mansion to take the people. Silver Hand was arranged to cooperate with Yang Qindong to eliminate the assassins because he was rational in doing things. But in the Wolf Fong Special Forces, the real big brother was still the Captain Tai Hu. Okay, I will take 20 people away. The rest will be left to you. Clean up this place. When they wake up, interrogate them one by one. I want to know all the secrets in their hearts. Yang Qindong patted Silver Hand's shoulder and said so. Please rest assured, 6th young master, I promise to complete the task. This slap made Silver Hand extremely excited. He even noticed that the other team members were looking at him with envy. This was Yang Qindong, the soul of Yangxia, the founder of the 5-Star Army, and also the founder of the Wolfang Special Forces. It could be said that everyone's current achievements were all thanks to Yang Qindong. A person who was like a god in their eyes actually patted him on the shoulder. How could his comrades not be envious? Yang Qindong didn't think so much. Instead, he had already left the Xing Wang Temple under the protection of 20 members of the Special Forces and went straight to the 3 Provinces King's Mansion. At the 3 Provinces King's Mansion, the atmosphere was a little tense at the moment. The battlefield in the small courtyard couldn't be taken down for a long time. The people in the city began to join in. When the mutiny outside, General Kai Wenju was killed and so on were reported to Zhu Huituan. His face was already very ugly. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. Men immediately take this king's tiger tally and mobilize the troops. Invite General Luo Guan, Rajiv, Azad, and Hak from the Mengding Mansion to the Yunnan Mansion. No matter what, we must kill Yang Qindong. Go quickly. Zhu Huituan's voice was no longer as calm as it used to be. He couldn't help but be anxious. Once Yang Qindong escaped this time, he would be at a disadvantage righteously. In this way, the people of the 3 provinces who knew the truth would no longer believe him. Once they stood on Yang Qindong's side, how could he make a comeback? He wasn't afraid of the people, but an organized group of people was terrifying. Even if these people couldn't be used by him, they couldn't be used by Yang Qindong. But now, it seemed that he had underestimated the commoners' strength. To think that they had gathered an army of over 10,000 commoners right under his nose. What kind of means did they have to use to achieve this? Thinking of this, Zhu Huihua felt his scalp tingle. He felt as if a huge mountain was pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. The best way to solve all of this was to kill Yang Qindong. Once this person was gone, the people would lose their nuclear core force, and it would be much easier to deal with them. In the end, Yang Qindong had to die. That's right, inform Muing Tu to immediately enter the city and cooperate with General Meng Ning to take over the city's defense. Once the 5-Star Army appears outside the city, we must defend the city and wait for reinforcements. After thinking about it, Zhu Huituan decided that this Miao King would come in handy. Zhu Huituan didn't completely believe in the Miao people. Therefore, on the surface, it seemed like he put Wu Yingtu in an important position, but he didn't allow the Miao army to enter the city. He only allowed them to set up camp outside the city. But now, seeing that the situation in the city was getting out of control, he thought of the 10,000 Miao soldiers and decided to put them in an important position. After giving out a few orders, Zhu Huituan sat back on the throne, and his face looked much better. Next, he waited for news and battle reports from various parties. At the same time, he was also looking forward to the possibility that Wang Zhanjiang could kill Yang Qindong. Zhu Huituan didn't know that Yang Qindong had already left the courtyard in the dark. Not only that, but the 2 assassin teams that were most likely to threaten his safety were also eliminated. However, this wasn't the worst. The worst thing was that his mansion was surrounded. Even the slightest movement here couldn't escape the surveillance of the Langius Special Force, led by Tai Hu. Just like the few messengers he sent out, it seemed like they had left the mansion and were safe. However, as soon as they walked into the nearby streets, they would be immediately intercepted and killed. It was still okay if they put down their weapons and surrendered, they could still live. However, anyone who resisted would be killed without mercy. In other words, all the orders in the mansion were only to enter and not to leave. After Yang Qindong arrived outside the mansion, the news couldn't even enter because there was no need to hide anything. They could directly lay their cards on the table. The 6th young master, Yang Qindong's appearance, made Tai Hu and the others excited. Their eyes were filled with admiration. Although Tai, who was the captain of the Langius Special Force, and looked majestic, they were originally a special force that was independent of the 5-Star Army. In other words, Their actions were not under the jurisdiction of the 5-star army. They didn't need to report their whereabouts. They were very mysterious and powerful. However, this was only in front of ordinary people. In front of Yang Qindong, these so-called arrogants could be removed one by one. It was because of Yang Qindong that the Langyus Special Force had everything. It was also because of Yang Qindong's support that the Langyus Special Force could be treated like this. Therefore, when facing the real founder of the Langyus Special Force, Tai Hu and the others only had respect and obedience in their eyes. Well done! Yang Qindong had always been a person who was not stingy with his praise. When he walked to Tai Hu's side, his right hand naturally fell on his shoulder and gently patted him. Then he asked about the situation in the mansion. Reporting to the 6th young master, there are a total of 3 doors in the mansion: the main door, the back door, and the side door. I have arranged people to watch over these 3 doors. I guarantee that when they come out, they will be killed. All their connections with the outside world have been cut off. Tai, who straightened his body and made a simple report of the situation. Very good. Yang Qindong nodded with satisfaction after listening. How is the situation in the mansion? If we rush in now, how confident are we in controlling this place? Reporting to the 6th young master, Skinny Monkey has already gone in just now. The situation inside is basically clear. There are about 400 bodyguards of Zhu Huihua in the mansion. There are also more than 100 servants and servants in the mansion. They don't have much fighting power. Therefore, as long as the 6th young master gives the order, we have absolute confidence in controlling this place. However, there may be some movements. After all, no one knows if Zhu Huihua has other means of rescue. When Tai Hu said this, he didn't look very confident. Chapter 1581. To be able to become the king of 3 provinces, it was normal for him to have some tricks up his sleeve. However, if he was not wrong, he would only release smoke to warn others of the danger. However, since Yang Qindong had decided to make a move, he was naturally not afraid of others knowing. Moreover, Chushi had already said that there should be a person called Mo Gue in the palace. He was the most troublesome existence because he knew nothing about this person. He did not know if this person had any other tricks up his sleeve. Whatever, the city is already in chaos. Now that the citizens have joined the war, we can't wait any longer. Otherwise, we will lose our strength. Let's do it this way. Tell everyone to get ready. We will attack in 10 minutes. We must finish the battle in the shortest time possible. As for whether there will be any reinforcements, we don't have to worry about that. With the current situation, I want to see who will come to save the king of 3 provinces. Yang Qindong made his final decision. He had 500 black cavalry soldiers to defend a few small courtyards. Now that the palace was so big, he had more than 100 Wolfang Special Force soldiers. He was more confident in facing any unexpected situation. One must know that there was everything in the warehouse. At worst, he could take out a small portion of the weapons in the warehouse, and it would be enough to solve any problems. Not to mention, once Zhu Huichun was taken down, the people of the 3 provinces would be in danger. Who would think that they would come to save him? Since Yang Qindong had said so, Tai Hu naturally did not have any doubts. After saluting, he immediately went to make arrangements. After the most elite Wolf Fang took action, they had already formulated 3 battle plans in just 10 minutes. This was to ensure that once an unknown situation occurred, they would be able to guarantee that they could immediately change the plan to solve the problem. 6th young master. When Tai Hu came in front of Yang Qindong again, his face was full of confidence. Let's do it. Yang Qindong, of course, knew that this was already prepared. He nodded his head. Let's do it. Tai Hu immediately turned around. Even though the sun had not risen yet, when he uttered those 2 words, hundreds of black shadows could be seen moving in different directions. They were advancing towards the prince mansions of the 3 provinces from 3 different directions. The battle outside was in full swing. Although the atmosphere in the 3 provincial palaces was a little tense, no one thought that there would be danger here. After all, the southern Cloud Manor was still in the hands of their king. Therefore, ordinary people were still doing what they were supposed to do. Many of the guards were still sleeping and resting. Only a portion of the guards were patrolling the mansion, but they were just walking around. When the members of the special forces suddenly appeared like ghosts, many of the guards fell to the ground before they could react to what had happened. Most of them had a fatal wound on their bodies. One of the weapons that the special forces members were most used to using was the 3-pronged bayonet. This type of weapon was already banned in the future. Its lethality was too great. Once one was injured by it, one would basically die from excessive bleeding. Scheming against the unsuspecting. With the strong attacking the weak, the patrolling guards didn't even have time to react before a third of them died. At this moment, someone finally reacted and began to shout loudly to warn the others. However, shouting at this moment wouldn't affect the overall situation. Even if the guards who were already resting woke up and took out their swords, they would only be able to hold on for a little longer. Not good, not good. A guard rushed into the main hall of the Prince Mansion and knelt down in front of the Prince of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huiqin. What's going on? Why are you so flustered? Zhu Huiqin was unhappy. On the other hand, Qin Tian, who was standing at the side waiting for news, had an extremely ugly expression. This was because he could vaguely hear the battle cries, and it didn't seem to be far away. This made his scalp tingle. Reporting to your Majesty, someone suddenly launched an attack on the Prince Mansion. The guards. What's wrong with the guards? Zhu Huiqin walked forward impatiently and grabbed the guard's collar as he asked anxiously, "The guards can't hold on anymore." What? Hearing this, Zhu Huiqin couldn't help but let go of his right hand and involuntarily took a few steps back until he came to Qin Tian's side. After being supported by Qin Tian, he stopped. However, his face was pale, and it was obvious that he was frightened. Even Qin Tian, who was behind him, wasn't any better. This was because he didn't expect that someone would have designs on the Prince Mansion at this time and harm the Prince Mansion. However, intuitively, he still didn't think that it was Yang Qindong's doing. This was Yunnan Manor, and the other party was surrounded in the small courtyard. Logically speaking, the other party should be unable to protect himself. Why would they come to find trouble with him? How would Qin Tian know that Yang Qindong's personal strength was strong? Under the dark sky, with his master-level movement technique, unless someone was watching him, it wouldn't be difficult for him to break out of the encirclement. Qin Tian didn't think that it was Yang Qindong's doing. He looked at the guard and asked, "Do you know who is coming? How many people are there?" "I don't know. Those people are too strong. Our guards aren't their opponents at all. We only held on for a while because of our advantage in numbers. However, now that we don't have the advantage in numbers, we can't hold on any longer. Your Majesty, please think of a way." The guard who reported the news shook his head. Under the dark sky, how could he have the time to observe those things? He was only here to report the news. On the other hand, Zhu Huiqin was worthy of being the king of 3 provinces. He still had some courage. The panic just now was only because of the sudden incident. Now that he knew the situation outside, he immediately said, Go, and set a fire. Inform the people outside that the Prince Mansion is in danger." "Oh," the guard responded and turned to leave. Zhu Huiqin, who was left behind, grabbed Qin Tian's arm and went straight to the inner courtyard. A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. Zhu Huiqin killed his elder brother and younger brother. He also offended the southern Ming dynasty and Bugnam of Gojoseon. Under such circumstances, how could he not have a backup plan? For example, there was a secret basement in the Prince Mansion. The people who built the basement had been killed by him. Now, as long as he hid there, it would be difficult to be discovered. Zhu Huiqin pulled Qin Tian and didn't take anyone else with him. He didn't even care about his family members. He quietly disappeared from the prince mansion and hid in a secret room. As the host, Zhu Huiqin was prepared. However, as a guest, Mo Gui didn't have such conditions. When he learned that someone had killed their way into the prince mansion, he let out a long sigh. Then he went to the transmitter and started to send a message. This was the last telegram that Mo Gui could send. He had already thought of the content. However, he had been hoping that he wouldn't need to use the content in his life. But now, even the prince mansion of 3 provinces was about to be attacked. He knew that it was time. This was a telegram of desperation. Mo Gui sent the message that someone had killed their way into the prince mansion and that he would be killed soon. He also reported that Zhu Huiqin was a good-for-nothing who was indecisive. That was why he had ruined the good situation. It was a mistake to ally with such a person. Yes, Mo Gui thought that Yang Qindong was going to die. There were only 500 people. So what if they were powerful? If Zhu Huiqiu came up to kill, he would directly send all the 50,000 troops in the city. Even if the other party had firearms, under the absolute advantage of numbers, he would be able to break through the defense line and kill Yang Qindong. However, the stupid Zhu Huiqin chose to capture Yang Qindong alive. As a result, he lost the initiative. When Mo Gui wanted to change his mind, it was too late. After that, Mo Gui expressed his gratitude to Uncle Ing for saving his life. He said that it was time for him to repay Uncle Ing for saving his life. He would die to repay Uncle Ying's kindness. After sending the telegram, Mo Gui dismantled the radio station and buried it where he had dug the hole. He didn't want people to know that there was a radio station here because it would make people think of Uncle Ing behind him and threaten the safety of some people. When he was done, the battle cries outside the door were getting closer and closer. Mo Gui smiled bitterly and took out a pill from his sleeve. He swallowed it without hesitation and closed his mouth. Clang! The door was pushed open and 2 special forces rushed in. It wasn't difficult for Langya to take down the entire prince mansion. In the end, all the guards in the mansion were killed. The few who surrendered survived. Unfortunately, they didn't find Zhu Huiqin. Even Chen Tian, the civil official, was nowhere to be found. Bring Zhu Changjiu here. Yang Qindong called the steward of the prince's mansion, who had been instigated by Yang San, after failing to find anyone, and even searching twice carefully, came to no avail. Zhu Changjiu came to Yang Qindong, trembling with fear. After knowing the identity of the person who came, he knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live Bugnam of Gojoseon!" "Well, don't be afraid. You're one of us. We won't make things difficult for you. When we're done here, you can go to Yangxie and reunite with your sister. You're a meritorious official, so you'll be rewarded accordingly." After comforting him, Yang Qindong asked if there was a secret passage or a basement in the mansion. Although Zhu Changjiu had been with Zhu Huiqin for many years, he didn't know much about it. He shook his head and said, "Your Majesty, I really don't know about it." Yang Qindong was not surprised by this answer. After all, Zhu Huihua had even abandoned his wife and child. In other words, even his family members did not know the location of the secret passage, let alone a steward of the residence. "Well, you should know a man called Mo Gui, right?" "Oh, yes, the mysterious man you reported to Director Yang San." Chapter 1582. His name is Mo Gui. This humble one knows this person. Zhu Changjiu, who had regained his senses, quickly replied, "Okay, bring him in." Yang Qindong waved his hand, and Mo Gui, who was pale, was carried into the yard and stood in front of Zhu Changjiu. Zhu Changjiu had indeed taken poison. The special forces were still a step too late and did not manage to save him. But even so, Yang Qindong still needed to confirm this person's identity. Once he was sure, he might be able to obtain some information by searching for this person's identity. Yes, he's the mysterious man. Zhu Changjiu didn't know Mo Gui's name, but he had seen him before, so he recognized him immediately. All right, thank you. You can go and rest now. Yang Qindong nodded. His gaze fell on the dead Mo Gue as he spoke regretfully. He was so close to catching this person. If he guessed correctly, this person should be the mole who reported Yang Xie's situation to Zhu Huichen, but he didn't know who ordered him to do so. Yang Qindong had a good memory. He thought about it carefully. It was definitely the first time he saw Mo Gue. It made sense. The mole was so careful that he couldn't find any clues even after investigating for a long time. Why would he send someone to contact Zhu Huichen? Come, take care of this person's body and get someone to draw a portrait. Yang Qindong still hoped that someone could recognize Mo Gue. Maybe there would be new clues. Sixth young master. Our people found this radio in Mo Gue's yard. Tai, who appeared, holding a dark green iron box. Oh. Yang Qindong's eyes lit up. Every radio station was a big warehouse item. When it was distributed, it had a serial number and was kept. Perhaps he could find some clues from this radio station. For example, the number 9826 was written at the bottom of the radio station. This was an important clue. Yang Qindong asked Tai Hu to keep it well and hand it over to Bureau Chief Yang Sen so that he could investigate it. By the way, what's the situation outside? Before Zhu Huichen disappeared, there was a big fire in the mansion. Everyone in the city must know that the mansion was in danger. If there were reinforcements, they should be here soon. Our brothers are watching outside. They haven't reported back yet, so there shouldn't be any reinforcements. Tai Hu replied respectfully, No reinforcements. Then there shouldn't be any. After Yang Qindong heard this, a smile appeared on his face. Although it was already dark, it was impossible for the prince's mansion not to attract attention when it first caught fire and was followed by billowing smoke. If there were reinforcements, they would have been here long ago. But it had been half an hour and no reinforcements were still not here, which meant there was a big problem. It would be best if there were no reinforcements. Even if there were, Yang Qindong would not be afraid. So this problem was quickly put to the back of his mind. He looked at Tai Hu and said, Don't worry about the outside. Hurry up and find the secret passage or the basement. This king has a feeling that Zhu Huichen is still in the yard. He hasn't gone far. The reason why Yang Qindong dared to make such an assertion was naturally because he saw the location of the 3 provinces' king palaces. This was the central area of the city. The people living nearby were either rich or noble. If it was just digging a secret passage in the mansion, it could be done quietly as long as he was careful. But if he wanted to dig it out, it would be too difficult to not alarm the rich who valued safety. In addition, Zhu Huichuan's position as the king of the 3 provinces was still very stable. There was no reason for him to take the risk of digging an escape passage. It was very likely that there was only a basement here. It was just for hiding. If this was the case, it was not difficult to find him. It just needed some time. Understood. After receiving the order, Tai Hu, who was in charge of the special forces, began to search the courtyards one by one. As long as there was a trace of suspicion, they would dig 3 feet into the ground to take a closer look. Let's not talk about finding the passage first. Let's talk about General Ming, who was also in the city. This general, who was entrusted with an important task by Zhu Huichen, was now standing on the wall of Yunnan Manor with a thoughtful expression. He naturally knew about the warning from the king palaces, but he did not send out troops to meet them. Speaking of which, Meng naturally had his own reasons for doing this. For example, he suspected that there should be a trap waiting for him around the king palaces. Once he went, he was afraid that not only would he not be able to save people, but he might also lose his life. He was naturally willing to do such a risky thing. Of course, the most important point was the second point, which was that Meng was dissatisfied with Zhu Huichen. Meng was previously under King Min Zhuang, Zhu Huichen. At that time, Zhu Huichen was only King Guangdong. Later, this person rebelled, killed his own brother, and set up his own house. Meng followed him, but he was still only a general. Speaking of which, a general seemed to be very awe-inspiring. But in fact, those who understood the military structure of the three provinces knew that Zhu Huiyu had personally appointed several great generals, such as Yunnan's great General Luo Guan, Guizhou's great General Jiang Wuqing, Guangxi's great General Bai Kuan, and so on. Meng Neng was also a general, which made him dissatisfied. No matter what, he had the merit of supporting the emperor. If he did not follow Zhu Huichen, but followed King Min Zhuang, how could there be the current king of the three provinces? Now, Zhu Huichen was the king of the three provinces, but he was still a general. He was also arranged to be by Zhu Huichuan's side and was not allowed to lead troops alone. This obviously showed that Zhu Huichen did not trust him. Meng Neng remembered very clearly that Zhu Huichen had promised him before that once he achieved great things, he would be the general of the army. At that time, all the generals would be under his control. Only the word commander was added, but he could indeed become the highest commander in the army. Zhu Huichuan's slip of the tongue made Meng Ning unhappy. Now he was worried that there was an ambush in the king's mansion, so why would he take the risk? Pass down the order without a military order. No one is to act rashly. Meng Neng said thoughtfully. At this moment, Meng Neng was watching and waiting to see how the situation would develop. With military power, he was confident that no matter what the situation was, he could deal with it. As long as the main force of the five-star army did not appear, the initiative was in his hands. Outside the city, Wu Yingtu also received the report from the scouts and knew about the fire and smoke in the king's mansion. However, he made the same choice as Meng Neng. This did not mean that the two of them had the same thoughts, but he did not dare to act rashly without a command. He was different from Meng Neng. Meng Neng was Zhu Huichuan's direct subordinate, at least he thought so. He was leading the Miao army. If he entered the city without a command, he would be punished severely. Thinking that it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble, he led the 10,000 soldiers and did not move. He only sent scouts into the city to gather information. He was also waiting for Zhu Huichuan's military order. Before this, he was optimistic that Zhu Huichen had already made arrangements. Even if the king's mansion was on fire, if he was not there, who would know who was burning? Back to Wang Zhangjiang. At this moment, he could not even protect himself. The development of the situation was completely out of his expectations. The king's mansion that was in charge of his security had rebelled. Not only that, even General Kai Wenju was killed in the chaos. Without the help of the king's mansion, more and more civilians rushed in front of his army. After a round of fighting, the number of soldiers under Wang Zhangjiang's command was constantly decreasing. Originally, there were close to 20,000 soldiers, but now, not even half of them were left. At this moment, even if he saw the king's mansion on fire, what else could he do? The three generals either did not help, waited, or were unable to protect themselves. This created enough time for Yang Qindong. The Lengia team members checked one courtyard after another, getting closer and closer to Zhu Huichuan's secret entrance. In the secret underground room, Zhu Huichen did not have a radio, so he did not know what was happening outside. He was optimistic that as long as he wasn't caught by the five-star army, it wouldn't be long before the emperor's army appeared. Then the prince's mansion would be taken back and he would be safe. I did not expect this Yang Qindong to have a trick up his sleeve. He actually wants to catch me. Just you wait. After this king quells the chaos, I will definitely cut you into pieces. Even in the secret room, Zhu Huichen was still cursing Yang Qindong, venting his dissatisfaction. The only one standing at the side, Qin Tian, also had a look of resentment. However, he saw deeper than Zhu Huichen. He said fawningly, "Your Majesty, actually it is not entirely a bad thing that the king's mansion is under attack. At least this Yang Qindong has revealed all his trump cards. Once our army surrounds the king's mansion At that time, he will not have any tricks up his sleeves. He will really be at our mercy." "Haha, well said." Zhu Huiqin burst into laughter after hearing these words. However, Chen Tian also expressed his worry. "Your Majesty, I am afraid that Yang Qindong will not be able to find your Majesty." In his desperation, will he vent his anger on the people in the king's mansion? He won't. On this point, Zhu Huiqin was very confident. This was also the reason why he only brought Chen Tian to the secret room and did not bring his family. He said confidently, "If Yang Qindong dares to harm my family, then his reputation will be tarnished for thousands of years. In this way, he will have no place to turn over. Furthermore, if he can't find this king, what is the use of taking my family? There's no way he doesn't understand this." This was the current situation of the Great Ming Dynasty, or rather, the current situation of the Han people under the influence of Confucianism. Here, the emphasis was on not harming the family. Chapter 1583. For Yang Qindong to have such achievements today, even if he were to die now, history would record him in detail. After all, he had shown the might of the Han people, which was worthy of affirmation. On the other hand, if he really touched Zhu Huilio's family, he would be completely morally stained. If that really happened, he would not be able to rest in peace even if he died. His family and loved ones would be ashamed of it. It was because he had thought this through that Zhu Huilu was so confident. That's good. If that's the case, the king has nothing to worry about. The king will definitely win. Chen Tian was also relieved. He was really afraid that Yang Qindong would not be able to defeat the enemy and would act against the families of the 3 provincial kings. However, after thinking about it carefully, the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. As long as Yang Qindong still had a shred of rationality, he would not do such a thing. Hearing the slogan that the king will definitely win, Chen Tian laughed out loud. "All right, let's see how Yang Qindong is captured alive or how he dies. Does he really think that he can turn the situation around after taking down the prince's mansion? This proves that he can't hold on any longer. This is just his last act of madness. He is definitely going to lose." Yang Qindong, who Zhu Huilu thought was going to lose, was currently sitting on the throne where Zhu Huilu sat, quietly listening to Tai Hu's report. 6th young master, the 10,000 Miao soldiers outside the city, did not act rashly because they did not receive any orders and did not know what was going on here. Actually, this is normal. However, why is that General Meng also not moving? This is really hard to understand. Tai Hu looked as if he was asking for advice. After all, it was a rare opportunity to learn from Yang Qindong directly. Yang Qindong also thought highly of Tai Hu. If there was an opportunity to teach him, he would not be stingy. He first smiled, then said, "The development of everything in the world is not the same. Everyone has their own selfish motives. Obviously, this Meng Ning also has his own thoughts. Before figuring out why the prince's mansion was set on fire, he will not act rashly. I think he is afraid of falling into our ambush and wants to wait for the best price. Ah, but Zhu Huihua was his king. If his king was in trouble, shouldn't his subordinates immediately send troops to save him? Isn't he afraid that Zhu Huiqin is really fine and will come back to settle old scores with him?" Tai, who still didn't understand, Yang Qindong said patiently, "If it were any other time, of course I would be scared. But now was the most chaotic time. Moreover, if Zhu Huiying is fine, then something must be wrong with this prince. If that is the case, Yang Xie will definitely be in chaos. If Zhu Huilu wants to take advantage of this opportunity to gain benefits, he must have people around him. Meng Nang knows this and knows that he is still valuable, so he is not afraid that Zhu Huilu will turn against him. So that's how it is." Tai Hu finally understood. Then he smiled and said, "But it's a pity that he doesn't know that not only is the 6th young master fine, but only a little over 100 of us from the special forces managed to take down the prince's residence. He's going to miss such a good opportunity to serve the emperor and perform well." Haha, that's right. Yang Qindong shared the same opinion. The prince's residence was not the courtyard he lived in. Because it was small, it was easy to defend. The prince's residence was big and had many walls. If Meng Nan led the army here, it would be impossible for him to defend this place. The best result would be for him to leave with his men. In this way, he would lose the chance to capture Zhu Huilu alive. It could be said that all his efforts would be in vain. However, Meng Nan did not seize this opportunity, which doomed the 3 provincial kings to defeat. While the 2 of them were still talking, the special forces on the other side were not idle. Other than leaving the necessary people to guard the 3 gates to prevent any accidents, the other members were carefully searching. Since Yang Qindong said that Zhu Huilu didn't run away, then he definitely wouldn't run away. As long as they searched carefully, they would definitely find the entrance to the secret passage. That would be the time for Wolf Fang to perform a meritorious service. Every member of the team was searching attentively, not wanting to leave any corner unturned. Among them, Skinny Monkey's movements were the fastest. Looking carefully, the members of Wolf Fang were all tall and strong. In comparison, Skinny Monkey, who weighed less than 50 kilograms, was an exception. However, not only did he become a member of Wolf Fang, but he was also the leader of Wolf Fang Iron Tiger. This was because he had real skills in other aspects. For example, he was the one who entered the prince's residence to investigate. Relying on his small body, his qigong was very good, and he was also very agile. He was very suitable for spying. His skills were not difficult, but he also knew a lot of unorthodox ways. One of them was tomb raiding. Before joining Wolf Fang, he had followed others to rob tombs because of his small body. For example, he could squeeze into some narrow places. For this reason, he was more familiar with the structure of the underground secret passage than the other members. He led a small team of 10 people to search one house after another. His hand tapped on the first floor to see if it was different from the other floors. In this way, in a short period of time, when the others only searched 2 or 3 houses, he had already searched 7 or 8 houses with this method. Finally, he stepped into the house at the secret entrance. This was a storage room, and there were all kinds of daily necessities inside. A room like this looked no different from any other room. However, under Skinny Monkey's leadership, everyone still carefully checked every inch of the room. When he finally came to the corner of the room, in front of a pile of salt, he suddenly stopped. A faintly discernible shoe print was right below the salt bag. If it wasn't for the light of the torch, he was afraid that this oversight would have directly swept past it. "Has anyone been here before?" Skinny Monkey squatted down and asked the other members. Someone must have pushed the door open to check, but no one would search this corner. One of the team members answered aloud. "Hee, this is interesting." Skinny Monkey agreed with this answer. It was because of this that his eyes became brighter. "Someone, move this salt bag away. Be careful." Skinny Monkey was their captain. After the captain gave the order, a member immediately came forward and moved the salt bag away, revealing a flat ground. Just from the appearance alone, it was impossible to tell that it was different from other places. If this is the entrance, it's really ingenious. The skinny, monkey-like man smiled with great interest. Then he leaned forward and gently knocked on the floor a few times. A few echoes sounded, making a slightly crisp sound. This sound was completely different from the dull sound of knocking on the ground. When this sound came out, Skinny Monkey's smile became wider. Then he said with a very confident tone, "Go and call more people here. There's something here." This was also why Skinny Monkey was cautious. If the 3 provincial kings were really hiding here, in case there were any ambushes or traps, his group of 10 people was still too small. After Skinny Monkey gave the order, several groups of Special Forces members nearby rushed over. When the number of people reached 50, Skinny Monkey decisively got someone to find a heavy hammer and smashed it fiercely on the ground. He believed that there must be some kind of mechanism controlling this place, but he didn't have time to find it. He could only use the simplest method, violently smashing the door. Dang, 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 dang. Under the continuous smashing of the heavy hammer, a black hole with a diameter of nearly 1 meter appeared in front of everyone. At this moment, Skinny Monkey didn't need to say anything. A member suddenly jumped in and disappeared. In the underground secret room, Zhu Huiqi and Qin Tian were still talking about the outside world. From their conversation, they had already determined that the reinforcements were about to arrive, and they should be getting closer and closer to getting out. At this moment, a sound came out, causing Zhu Huiqi and Qin Tian's faces to gradually turn ugly. Obviously, they had thought of something, but before they could do anything, the crashing sound stopped, and a figure appeared in their sight. Then, the skinny monkey-like figure jumped down and came to Zhu Huiqi and Qin Tian. Skinny Monkey had naturally seen Zhu Huiqi and Qin Tian before. When he saw the two of them, he couldn't help but grin. Capturing the two of them would definitely be a great achievement. Skinny Monkey suddenly appeared in the underground secret room from the sky, giving Zhu Huiqi and Qin Tian a shock. They didn't think that someone would discover their underground secret room. It should take a long time and extraordinary ability to find them. Not to mention whether or not the 5-star army had such talents. They had only occupied the 3 provinces with a small number of soldiers. Now, they should be facing the various armies that came to rescue the emperor. How would they have the time to look for them? On the bright side, the 5-star army that occupied the prince's mansion should have been surrounded by the emperor's army or even killed. But what was going on now? At this moment, both Zhu Huiqi and Qin Tian's faces were very ugly. Qin Tian even intentionally rubbed his eyes. Obviously, even now, he still didn't think that all of this was real. Hee, the two of you don't have to doubt. You are now our captives. Of course, you can resist, but the consequences, will be very serious. Skinny Monkey said as he took out the military knife in his hand and played with it. It was as if he was saying, "If you dare to act rashly, I won't be polite." Both Zhu Huiqi and Qin Tian were smart people. So how could they resist at this moment? Especially Zhu Huiqi. He was the king of 3 provinces and was also a member of the Zhu family. Even if he fell into Yang Qindong's hands, he wouldn't dare to hurt him. Chapter 1584. Just like what Yang Qindong thought before. As the people of the great Ming dynasty, they had their own pride. Perhaps it was because they had not come into contact with the outside world. They were simply short-sighted and narrow-minded. In the eyes of these people, the great Ming dynasty was the whole world. Anyone outside of the great Ming dynasty was a barbarian. They should look up to the great Ming dynasty, especially the people of the Zhu family, who were incomparably proud and arrogant. Even if Zhu Huiqin killed his brother, so what? That was their Zhu family's matter. Not to mention, he still had the title of the 3 kings. Based on this, as long as he didn't really rebel against the great Ming dynasty, even if he did something wrong, the emperor wouldn't do anything to him, let alone Bugnam of Gojoseon, who wouldn't dare to do anything to him. With this thought in mind, after a brief shock, Zhu Huiqin tidied up his robe and became arrogant again. Whereas Bugnam of Gojoseon? This king wants to see him. Seeing that Zhu Huiqin had given up the intention to resist, the skinny monkey-like man immediately laughed, turned around, and said, "Then please." When Zhu Huiqin reappeared in the main hall of the king's mansion, he was no longer the king, but a prisoner. Yang Qindong sat on the throne that Zhu Huiqi was supposed to sit on and looked down. This made the 3 provincial kings very uncomfortable when they entered the hall. Cough, Bugnam of Gojoseon. This king admits defeat in your hands this time. Say, what do you want? Of course, this prince will consider giving Yunnan province to you, but that's all. As for Guizhou and Guangxi, they will still belong to this prince. This is the biggest concession I can make. You should also know that the southern Ming dynasty will not agree to more. After entering the main hall, Zhu Huiqin said to Yang Qindong in a warning tone, giving people the feeling that Bugnam of Gojoseon had taken advantage of him. Yang Qindong, couldn't help but laugh out loud. At this time, Zhu Huichen still wanted to use the Southern Ming Empire to suppress him. Such a person's mind was completely corrupted by the great Ming Empire. If it was described in Yang Qindong's words, then it was hopeless. Zhu Huiyan didn't know about this. Seeing Yang Qindong laughing, he thought that the other party was very satisfied with this result. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. No matter what, he was still a prisoner. Although he believed that with the Southern Ming Empire as his backing and his surname being Zhu, Yang Qindong wouldn't have the guts to do anything to him. However, this was his own opinion. Who knew if this person would go crazy and suddenly attack him? Others might not know what kind of person he was in Nanming's eyes. But how could he not know? He killed his brothers and forced the Southern Ming Empire to make him the king of 3 provinces. It was hard to say that Zhu Qijin didn't have any thoughts at all. Perhaps he could borrow Yang Qindong's hand to kill him, and Zhu Qijin might even be happy. All right, since that's the case, please send someone to send this prince out of the city. Don't worry. Since this prince has lost this time, I will admit defeat. I won't send anyone to seize Yunnan province. Zhu Huiyan thought that he had the upper hand and spoke with a magnanimous look. What he didn't know was that after these words, Yang Qindong couldn't help but laugh out loud again. When Chun Tian heard this laughter, his expression changed drastically. He had dealt with Yang Qindong more than once or twice, and he had never really gained any advantage. He didn't think that the other party would let things go so easily now that he had the initiative. Your Majesty, please don't say any more. Chun Tian felt that something was wrong. He stretched out his right hand and gently tugged on Zhu Huiyun's sleeve as he reminded him softly, "HM, what's going on?" Zhu Huiyun also felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't figure it out. There was no need for Zhu Huiyun to figure it out because Yang Qindong had already opened his mouth and said, "Let you go?" Zhu Huiyun, has your brain been eaten by a dog? Can't you see the situation clearly at this time? Yang Qindong, how can you say that? I'm a member of the imperial family with the surname Zhu, and I'm also the Southern Ming Emperor's king of the 3 provinces. How can you slander me here? Are you not afraid of angering the Southern Ming dynasty and sending an army to destroy you? When he spoke to this point, Zhu Huiyun's voice unconsciously dropped a lot. In terms of righteousness, Yang Qindong was a subject of the great Ming dynasty. However, in reality, the current Yang Xie was already many times stronger than the great Ming dynasty. It was just that some people were unwilling to admit it. Then there was the problem. Even if Yang Qindong really did something to Zhu Huiyun, what did he do? Would the Southern Ming dynasty start a war with Yang Xie because of this matter? Not to mention whether they could win or not. In the eyes of the Southern Ming dynasty, Zhu Huiyun was not someone to be trifled with. He was not much different from a traitor. They probably wanted the 2 of them to fight, so how could they meddle in other people's business? This was also the reason why Zhu Huiyun's voice was getting softer and softer. After saying this, his aura was no longer as strong as before. Humph! Seeing that Zhu Huiyun had become more obedient, Yang Qindong began to flip out. Zhu Huiyun, who do you think you are? If you didn't have a good family, what are you now? For power, you even killed your own brother and brother. Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to enter your ancestral grave after death? Aren't you afraid that they are waiting for you on the ground with resentment? Zhu Huiyun, this time, you invited this king to discuss matters. You said that as long as this king came and expressed his sincerity, you would give the 3 provinces to this king. You also said that this would prevent the people of the 3 provinces from experiencing the flames of war. Look, you make it sound so nice, but what is the truth? When Yang Qindong said the word, his voice raised by more than 2 octaves. Because of this, Zhu Huiyun's body trembled and his head lowered even more. However, Yang Qindong had no intention of letting him off easily. He continued to say, "The truth is, ever since this king entered Yunnan Manor, you have always wanted to kill this king. You launched fierce attacks again and again. If it weren't for this king's strong warriors, I'm afraid that this king would be dead by now and end up like your brother and brother. Since you wanted to kill this prince, and now you've been captured by this prince, then tell me, do you think this matter will be resolved so easily? Ah, what do you want to do? Don't tell me you still want to harm this king?" Hearing this, Zhu Huiyin could no longer be an ostrich. "Harm you? Bah, you don't deserve it." Yang Qindong shook his head, then said in a resolute and unquestionable tone, "What's the difference between killing you and killing an ant? When the time comes, this king only needs to tell the world that you were afraid because you did something wrong and committed suicide in the king's mansion. I'm sure this result will convince a lot of people and make many people believe it. At that time, tell me, who will care about a dead person?" No. Zhu Huiyun's face changed drastically. It was not wrong for him to like power. In order to obtain power, he would do anything and kill countless people. However, this did not mean that he was not afraid of death. Killing others and being killed by others were two completely different concepts and results. What's wrong? Are you afraid? Seeing Zhu Huiyun's pale face, Yang Qindong knew that he had warned him enough. Next, it was time to ask for the result, which was what he wanted to know the most. Compared to this result, Zhu Huiyun's life and death really did not matter to him. He was just a king with the surname Zhu in the great Ming dynasty. In today's great Ming dynasty, there were dozens, if not hundreds, of kings like him. However, many of the kings were just in name. Not many people had the military power of 3 provinces, like Zhu Huiyin. So what if he had the military power of 3 provinces? For Yang Qindong, who had already occupied Eastern Europe, the grasslands, Southeast Asia, and Central Asia, these 3 provinces had never been in his eyes. Zhu Huiyin, this king just wants to tell you that killing you is like killing an ant to this king. It's not a problem at all. Of course, if you can cooperate with this king and tell me everything you know, this king can still consider sparing your life. This, Yang Qindong threw out an olive branch, but Zhu Huiyin did not immediately agree. He was still wondering if Yang Qindong was trying to scare him. Without getting an answer immediately, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with anger. Then his gaze fell on Beta, Persei beside him. The two had been together for many years and had already formed a certain tacit understanding. Beta, Persei nodded, then strode into the hall and came to Zhu Huiyun's side. Without any explanation, he raised his hand and slashed down. An arm fell in the hall, and a wail from the bottom of his heart sounded. "Ah, it hurts, it hurts." The voice came from Chun Tian's mouth. The slash just now had cut off his left arm. This sudden slash was completely out of Zhu Huiyun's expectations. When he saw the bloody arm falling at his feet, he instinctively jumped to the side, but at the same time, cold sweat began to flow from his forehead unknowingly. After Beta, Persei swung his sword. His gaze fell on Zhu Huiyin, as if to say, "What do you think? Do you want me to slash you too?" Although Beta Persei did not say anything, everything was just a warning from his eyes. But Zhu Huiyin did not dare to take the risk. He immediately shouted, "Don't kill me, don't kill me. Bugnam of Gojoseon, whatever you want to ask, I'll say it, I'll say it." In fear and horror, Zhu Huiyin did not even have the courage to call himself this king. Yang Qindong smiled with satisfaction and said, "This prince will give you a chance. Tell me about Mo Gui. Who is his master?" Mo Gui nodded. Yang Qindong didn't know what to say, but he didn't know what to say. Chapter 1585. Compared to the external threat, Yang Qindong was more concerned about the traitor. He wouldn't be able to sleep peacefully until the traitor was eliminated. Now that Mo Gue was dead, the only person who had interacted with him was Zhu Huiyin. He had to get an answer from this person. With Chen Tian's missing arm in front of him, Zhu Huiyin naturally answered all the questions. However, he knew very little about Mo Gue, but he didn't dare to not answer, nor did he dare to speak carelessly. He could only give a detailed account of the first time he met Mo Gue and the last time he met him. An hour passed. When he was done, Zhu Huiyin spread his hands and said, "I only know that there is a mysterious force supporting Mo Gue. As for who it is, I really don't know." Yang Qindong naturally believed him. He didn't expect Zhu Huiyin to be so careful. Mo Gue had never mentioned the identity of his master. He originally thought that he would be able to find traces of his master. Now it seemed impossible. However, even though he believed that Zhu Huiyin wouldn't lie to him, it didn't mean that he wouldn't ask more. Chen Tiangong's bleeding had been stopped, and Yang Qindong had put the same problem on him. Chen Tian didn't know as much as Zhu Huiyin. However, in order not to get hurt again, he told Zhu Huiyin everything he knew. The facts proved that Zhu Huiyin wasn't lying. This result made Yang Qindong unhappy. There were still no clues about the traitor. Yang Qindong could only put it aside. Now that things had come to this, it was better to solve the problem of the 3 provinces first. Zhu Huiyin's capture meant that the overall situation was settled. Now, it was time to tie up the loose ends. Chen Tian, I'll give you a mission. If you complete it well, you can live. If you don't need to keep your other arm. Chen Tian's face was still pale because he had lost too much blood, and also because he was scared. After knowing that Yang Qindong was daring and did not take him seriously, Chen Tian became as obedient as a dog and said, "Please instruct me, Bugnam of Gojosian." Satisfied with Chen Tian's performance, Yang Qindong said, "I now order you to be this king's envoy. Go and meet General Ming and persuade him to surrender." The prince's mansion was on fire, followed by thick smoke. This was a call for help. Everyone who saw this scene had different thoughts. However, there was one person who wanted to go back to help, but he no longer had the ability to do so. This person was General Wang Zhanjiang. Wang Zhanjiang was a typical general of the great Ming dynasty. He had a foolishly loyal heart. In his eyes, she had received Zhu Huiyin's kindness, so she was his person in life and his ghost in death. Therefore, he was more anxious than anyone else when he saw that the Wang residence was in trouble. However, with the black cavalry firing their muskets on the inside and the traitorous soldiers and civilians on the outside, he was caught in the middle and was in a dilemma. If he couldn't even protect himself, how could he save others? "Charge," send everyone. "No matter what, we have to rush into the small courtyard. As long as we capture Bugnam of Gojosian, everything will be solved." Wang Zhanjiang thought of the simplest way to solve everything, which was to capture Yang Qindong alive and then use him to exchange for the 3 provinces' king. Wang Zhanjiang gave orders like a madman, then led the army to charge. Under his lead, the remaining 10,000 soldiers of the 3 provinces' army rushed toward the small courtyard like a tide. Even though they were constantly hit by firearms and fell to the ground in the process of charging, the tide of people was still like a wave without stopping. The power of firearms was greater in deterrence. When the opponents came without regard for their lives, the black cavalry, which had less than 500 people, finally felt a strong pressure. "Second brother, we can't go on like this. Let's break through." Dao Shao hurriedly came to Beta Persei's side to ask for instructions. Up until now, the black cavalry soldiers' arms were sore, numb, and swollen. Anyone who had been in the military or had experience with guns would know that shooting a gun was a very physically taxing thing. The continuous gunshots were also a test of the human body's physical fitness. This was because the black cavalry soldiers had better physical fitness. If it were an ordinary person, they would have been unable to shoot because their arms could not bear the force. A small number of the 500 black cavalry soldiers were injured, but most of them had reached their physical limits, especially when their arms were numb and they could no longer shoot. Even if they forced themselves to hold the gun, they had already lost their aim. Then let's break through. Beta Persei was also a little surprised by the stubbornness of the three provinces' army. But fortunately, the young master was no longer here, so he did not have to stay here and not move. Organize those who can still shoot and let them be responsible for covering the retreat of the others. We'll break through to the east. After Beta Persei gave the order, those who were supposed to set up the booby traps did so. The soldiers who were supposed to retreat also lined up, and the injured soldiers were supported by their comrades to the east. Beta Persei's decision was very decisive and caught the three provinces' army off guard. The east side was the main target of the attack, and a hole was quickly opened. Beta Persei and the others took the opportunity to leave. General Wang Zhanjiang, who was left behind, finally rushed into the small courtyard with the soldiers. Quick, surround this place. Don't let a single one escape. Finally, he rushed into the small courtyard. At this moment, Wang Zhanjiang's face was full of excitement. He seemed to see the scene of capturing Yang Qindong alive, and then saving Zhu Huituan, becoming the first hero. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. The booby traps left behind were triggered, causing a series of explosions. Hundreds of soldiers from the three provinces' army were killed or injured by the explosions. But Wang Zhanjiang did not care about all of this. In his eyes, all of this was just the black cavalry's last resistance. Quick, charge in. They don't have any power to resist. Charge in. Other than Wu Nanwang, kill everyone else. Kill them all. After losing so many people, he could finally get his revenge. Wang Zhanjiang had been suppressing his anger for a long time, but it was destined that his idea would not come true. When Wang Zhanjiang rushed into the small courtyard with the soldiers from the three provinces, he saw that there was no one there. Not to mention Yang Qindong's figure, there was not even a corpse of a dead 5-star army soldier. What's going on? Faced with this result, Wang Zhanjiang felt his mind go blank. He could not understand why this was happening. Reality did not give him more time to think, because soon after a soldier came to report that the courtyard was surrounded by the rebel army and civilians. In other words, they were now the prey and had nowhere to run. How many people do we have left? Wang Zhanjiang's face changed when he heard that they were surrounded, but he did not give up on the idea of breaking out. As long as he still had his strength, there was still a chance for him to break out. General, we only have about 3,000 people left. This answer made Wang Zhanjiang's face change. Then, like a zombie that had its energy sucked out of his body, he fell to the ground with a plop. He knew that this time it was completely over. Nearly 15,000 soldiers fought with no regard for their lives and did not care about the heavy losses. Until now, there were only about 3,000 people left. On the contrary, there were more than 20,000 rebels and civilians outside. He knew that this was a complete failure. Wang Zhanjiang did not believe that the 3,000 people he brought with him would have the strength of the black cavalry to be able to break out of the heavy encirclement. The general had lost his fighting spirit and hope. The other soldiers looked at each other and also lost their fighting spirit. Some of them even looked at Wang Zhanjiang and were ready to make a move. It was every man for himself, and it was time for him to fight for himself. A few hours later, around noon, the soldiers under Wang Zhanjiang's command rebelled, and he was killed in the courtyard. No one would have thought that the place that was supposed to be Yang Qindong's burial ground would become Wang Zhanjiang's burial ground. With Wang Zhanjiang's death, the remaining soldiers from the three provinces abandoned their weapons and surrendered. They were taken over by Cheng, whose soldiers and civilians. This was not the only piece of good news. Qin Tian also brought Ming over. After learning that the 5-star army could keep him and his family alive and that he could keep 10% of the wealth for his own use, Ming chose to surrender. The exception was the 10,000 Miao soldiers outside the city. Under the leadership of Miao King Wu Ingtu, they escaped in advance. Clearly, he also saw that the situation was turning for the worse. However, considering the various conflicts he had with the Five-Star Army, he did not believe that the other party would let him off so easily. Thus, he chose to flee, choosing to head to the Chuxiong Manor to meet up with General Luo Guan, Brigadier General Rajiv, Azad Hak, and the others. In just one night, Yunnan Manor changed hands. The original owner, Zhu Huihua, became a prisoner, and Yang Qindong, who was surrounded and killed, became the owner here. Beta Persei rushed to Yang Qindong with a telegram and reported, "Young master, the latest news is that 80,000 enemies have appeared in the west of the city. They are heading towards Yunnan Manor. If there are no accidents, they will reach the west wall in 2 hours." Previously, Beta Persei led the Black Cavalry to break out of the encirclement and then met up with Commander Chung, Hu, and the others who were outside. Then he came to the 3 provinces and walked to Yang Qindong's side. It was also because of Beta Persei's timely breakout that the Black Cavalry did not suffer any major losses. After a few days of fighting, the 500 Black Cavalry only lost 3 people in battle and more than 20 were injured. Most of the soldiers were just overly tired. Once they had enough time to rest, they would immediately be full of energy. 80,000? After Yang Qindong heard this, his expression did not change. He knew that this was the last force that Zhu Huihua left in Yunnan province. There was nothing to be afraid of against an enemy that had no backup. As long as they defended the city and stabilized the situation, victory would eventually be theirs. Chapter 1586. How many people can we mobilize? Yang Qindong asked Beta Persei, thinking that they would need an army to defend the city. "Young master, we have about 40,000 soldiers at our disposal. Among them, 30,000 are surrendered soldiers. However, not many of them are capable of fighting. There are also several tens of thousands of commoners. If we call upon them, they can also go up the tower to help." Hearing this answer, Yang Qindong knew that it would not be easy to rely on these people to defend the city. So he continued to ask, "Where are our reinforcements?" The closest one is the 20,000 reinforcements led by Yao Ingjun. They have already arrived at Chujing Prefecture in the northeast. They will arrive before noon tomorrow. The fastest one is the world's first cavalry army. They have already passed Yuanjiang Prefecture. If there are no accidents, they will arrive tomorrow night. There are also the other main reinforcements. They will arrive in about 2 to 4 days. Beta Persei reported to Yang Qindong with the timetable calculated by Wang Shan. "So, we can only rely on ourselves from today until noon tomorrow." When Yang Qindong said this, the corner of his mouth trembled slightly. He thought to himself, "This is good. Let the people here see the cruelty of war, and let them know that peace is not easy to come by." Beta Persei, go find Yang Sand and Commander Qinghu. Send out all the surrendered soldiers from the 3 provinces, as well as the civilians who can go up the city. Let them go up the city. Don't be afraid of spending money, and don't be afraid of dying. It is time to let some people see the benefits of joining Yangxia. Yang Qindong said, as if he had made some kind of decision. Beta Persei nodded heavily. He already understood Yang Qindong's meaning and knew what to do. With this order, the entire Yunnan prefecture became busy again. Yang San, who had been hiding in the dark, also appeared in front of everyone with a group of secret agents. They began to mobilize the civilians to go up the city tower to defend the city. It must be said that the 3 provinces were ruled by the 3 provinces' king, Zhu Huifeng, and many soldiers were recruited over the years. However, most of them were recruited to recruit able-bodied men. It was completely different from Yang San's recruitment process, where anyone who agreed to go up the tower to defend the city would be given silver. When the shining piles of silver were placed under the city gates, the enthusiasm of the citizens surged. It was said that money could move the gods. Now it seemed that it was true. Under the temptation of the silver, more and more civilians joined the army to defend the city. Among them were some middle-aged men over 40 years old. Normally, when the three provinces' kings were looking for able-bodied men, they would not be the target. But when there was silver to be taken, they actually took the initiative to join the army. The soldiers, the soldiers, the soldiers, the soldiers who were the soldiers. There were the soldiers who were the soldiers. It was clearly written that the soldiers only needed to hold on until noon the next day. Once the reinforcements from the 5-star army arrived, they would be considered to have completed their mission. Furthermore, they would not need to return the silver to the person who completed the mission. In the end, it was just one day. Every person who joined the army would be able to receive 5 taels of silver. To the commoners, this was no different from a pie falling from the sky. As a poor commoner, there were naturally not many people who would reject such an opportunity. The result of the recruitment was far beyond the expectations of Beta Persei, Yongsan, and the others. When they saw that there were 40,000 civilians as well as the surrendered soldiers, they all joined the mission to defend the city because of the silver. When the number of soldiers expanded to 80,000, they reported this to Yang Qindong. Do you see that? This is the strength of the civilians. Think about how ridiculous it is for those who treat the civilians as ants. Yang Qindong said with emotion. Then he handed the command of the defense to Beta Persei. Yang San was in charge of logistics. Beta Persei was naturally excited when he received the command of the defense. First, he found Cheng Hu and the soldiers of Lung Feng's 1st Army, 1st Division, and 1st Regiment, and made them the backbone of the army. After a simple distribution of 80,000 soldiers, he went up the city gate tower and waited for the enemy to appear so that they could fight. Miao Qingwu Ingtu saw that the situation was not good and fled. It was in the process of retreating that he encountered Yunnan's great General Luo Guan and 40,000 soldiers of the original Gala army. At that moment, 80,000 of them gathered together and headed straight for Yunnan Manor. And this was the power in the open. In the dark, Shiping King Mubin also led 10,000 soldiers to the foot of Yunnan Manor. Ever since he received the message that Zhu Huichun had begun to attack Yang Qindong 3 days ago, Shiping King Mubin could not sit still, thinking that when 2 tigers fought, one of them would definitely be injured, and with the intention of benefiting from the fight, he led the 10,000 elite soldiers of the West Pacifying Army to travel day and night. Finally, they arrived outside the southern Cloud Prefecture city without alerting anyone. Having lived in Yunnan Manor for generations, he knew the terrain like the back of his hand. He knew where the paths were and where the rivers were. It was because of this advantage that even Yang Xie's intelligence department did not know about the appearance of the Shiping army. It had to be said that this was the advantage of being a local snake. After arriving outside Yunnan Manor without anyone knowing, the scouts sent out found out that the 3 provincial armies were about to arrive at the city gates. The 5-star army in the city was also actively guarding against them. So the war is about to start. Then we just have to wait. Hearing the news, Mubin quickly suppressed his intention to take action. As for the missing Zhu Huichun, the 3 provinces king, he did not care at all. Without the king of the 3 provinces, Southern Cloud Prefecture would be his lair. If he had been actively defending himself all these years, he might have been able to fight against the 5-star army. It was all because of this person that his plan was delayed. Mubin did not have a good impression of Zhu Huichun. This was a typical shirking of responsibility. If he could not do something well, he would always find all kinds of excuses to blame others. This was also a sign of irresponsibility. Yunnan Manor was currently heavily guarded. It was not a suitable time for him to attack. Shiping King could wait. He was like a venomous snake in a dark corner. When the time was right, he would open his mouth and bite to achieve his goal. As for Luo Guan's troops, a group of 80,000 soldiers rushed over. Finally, they arrived outside the west city of Yunnan Manor just after noon. Then the army got into formation. Perhaps they had also received news that the 5-star Army's reinforcements were on their way. They did not have time to build catapults. They only took out some siege ladders. As the war drums of the 3 armies beat, they got into formation to attack the city. On the west city tower of Yunnan Manor, the surrendered soldiers and civilians looked at the mighty 3 provinces army that was in formation outside the city. Everyone had a bitter expression. Previously, they were tempted by the money that made them forget everything and join the army. However, when they saw the huge formation of the enemy, they realized that it was not easy to get the money. However, since he had received the money, he had to do something. Otherwise, even if the 3 provincial armies didn't attack the city, the inspection team arranged by the 5-star army in the city wouldn't let him off. Forget it. Let's do it. There are so many of us. Let's not be afraid. Even if they could not figure it out, the soldiers had to think it through. When they saw so many of their comrades standing around them, they could only cheer themselves up. This was also the thought of many of the soldiers guarding the city. Beta Persei and Yang Sen also saw this scene. Haha. Yang Sen laughed and said to Beta Persei, "Second brother, it seems that the morale of your soldiers is a little low. They are all new recruits. Many of them have not even seen blood. It's not a big deal for them to behave like this," Beta Persei said magnanimously. Although the morale of his 80,000 soldiers was indeed low, Beta Persei was not worried that the 3 provinces' army outside the city would attack the city. After all, the military strength of both sides was basically equal. In addition, they were the ones defending the city, so they had a natural advantage. Among the soldiers, there were the backbone of the Cold Front Regiment. The other party did not have heavy weapons to attack the city. No matter how he looked at it, his side had too much of an advantage. Seeing how confident Beta Persei was, Yang San was not worried anymore. After reminding him that the sword had no eyes, he went down the city tower to prepare food. Zhu Huihua had done some good things. For example, there was a lot of food stored in the city's warehouse. This was originally for his recruitment and independence, but now it was all given to Yang San. With these things, he could make incomparably delicious food. Presumably, under the stimulation of delicious food, the morale of the soldiers should also be improved. Okay, go and prepare more meat. I will use this to encourage the soldiers. Beta Persei naturally knew the importance of food to the soldiers. He smiled and sent Yang Sen away. Then he ordered someone to call Cheng Hu and instructed him that if the city tower was in danger, the backbone of the Cold Front Regiment would have to personally come out and kill the enemies on top of the city. Second brother, don't worry. It's only because the 6th young master didn't allow firearms. Otherwise, we wouldn't even need these people. Our Cold Front Regiment alone is enough to defend the city without losing it. If it's done well, we can even launch a counterattack. Cheng Hu replied confidently, Haha, I know your Cold Front Regiment is powerful. However, the 6th young master also wants these people to see blood. Sometimes no amount of education is as good as experiencing it yourself. So let's not use firearms. Unless the situation is out of our control, tell the soldiers that no one is to use firearms. Beta Persei, of course, knew how powerful the Cold Front Regiment was. This regiment, which was called a typical regiment by the outside world, was only second to the Black Cavalry in terms of combat ability. The city tower was ready. The soldiers of the 3 provinces outside the city also launched their attack. They already knew that the defenders were made up of surrendered soldiers and ordinary civilians. There were no real elite forces like the 5-star army. This made them feel relieved. Chapter 1587. The 5-star army had fought battles all over the country and had already made a great name for themselves. If it was the 80,000 5-star army here, they would have already fled without even fighting. However, The 80,000 surrendered soldiers and commoners were completely different. In their eyes, they were a proper army. If they couldn't even defeat these 5-star army, then all their training would have been in vain. Therefore, when they charged, the might of the 3 provinces' army was still very fierce. They didn't care about the arrows that were shot down from the city tower. They charged up the city walls with minimal losses, then set up countless scaling ladders and began to attack the city. Commoners who hadn't been trained could only shoot arrows. As for how far they could shoot and whether they could hit people, it was still too extravagant. Therefore, in the first wave of counterattack, the defending side didn't perform well. It wasn't until they saw countless scaling ladders on the city tower that countless enemies began to climb up with the help of the scaling ladders. When some of them were about to charge up, the defending soldiers became afraid. They didn't dare to imagine how many of them could survive in close combat. Don't panic. Take the prepared sleepers and throw them down. Quick! Cheng, who was in charge of commanding the front lines, seeing the enemy attack so smoothly, he couldn't help but shout out anxiously. Under his shout, Feng Zhan, Wang Jinlong, Su Digang, Hu Jun, Sun Dawei, and the other battalion commanders hid in the crowd and played their roles. Countless sleepers were thrown down from the city tower, smashing into the heads or bodies of the soldiers of the 3 provinces who were climbing up with the help of the scaling ladders. One by one, black figures fell from the sky and let out miserable cries. The sleepers' attack disintegrated the first wave of attacks of the 3 provinces' army. After throwing down over 1,000 corpses, the 3 provinces' army had no choice but to retreat. The first wave of attacks of the enemy was defeated so easily. The cheers of tens of thousands of people could be heard from the city tower. Obviously, the victory came so quickly that it greatly exceeded the expectations of the defending soldiers, especially the commoners. They were originally a little nervous, but now they realized that the battle wasn't as difficult as they thought. Their confidence began to swell, and their morale began to rise. However, the experienced officers like Cheng, who did not let down their guard. They knew that this was just a probing attack by the enemy, and the bitter battle was still to come. Despite the failure of the first wave of attacks, the soldiers of the 3 provinces did not show any signs of low morale. It was just a probing attack. This was a common tactic. He really didn't know why the civilians guarding the city were cheering so enthusiastically. Those who didn't know would think that the enemy had eliminated their main force. That's enough. You've all seen it just now. The soldiers guarding the city have mediocre combat strength. The arrows they shot were weak and powerless. This kind of army can't possibly be a match for our elite regular army. So, from now on, I ask everyone to buck up and unleash your strongest combat strength. As the one who led the most troops, Rajiv undoubtedly became the leader of the crowd. He looked at the other generals as he spoke, as if his words were military orders. Of these 80,000 men, Rajiv led 30,000 men, Luo Guan led 20,000 men, and Azad, Hak, and Wu Yingtu led 10,000 men each. Thus, they managed to gather an army of 80,000, forming a sizable force. Because his country, Bangra, had already been destroyed by the 5-star army, and his country had also announced its surrender. At this moment, Rajiv was already homeless. Now, he had no way to escape except to trust the king of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huihua. Until now, he still didn't know that Zhu Huihua had been captured by Yang Qindong. He still wanted to rush into Yunnan Prefecture, drive the 5-star army out of here, and then find Zhu Huihua as soon as possible. Then, both sides would cooperate. This way, he would have a place to live. All of this was due to Rajiv's own thoughts. As the king of the 3 provinces, even if he couldn't beat the enemy, he still had a way to save his life. Perhaps Zhu Huihua was now hiding in a corner of Yunnan Prefecture, waiting for him to rescue him. The generals were now homeless. Only by uniting could they form a joint force and not be easily bullied. It was under such circumstances that Rajiv took the initiative to stand up. No one had any doubts and were willing to listen to his command. Now that Rajiv had given the order, everyone knew that under the current situation, they could only survive by taking down Yunnan Prefecture and saving Zhu Huihua. Therefore, no one had any objections and agreed to this decision. When the force was concentrated in one place, it was still very powerful. When the army launched another siege, it was no longer a probing move. Instead, it was a real assault. More and more soldiers rushed to the city walls and began to climb up using scaling ladders. More and more wooden sleepers were thrown down. This was not the first time they had used these ladders. Not good, the pillows are useless. After throwing out the wooden sleepers, many people found that the effect was not as good as they had expected. Although the three provincial armies also suffered casualties, they did not retreat. Instead, they continued to climb up the ladder. Many people began to panic. Don't panic, throw down the kerosene. Feng Zhan and the others in the crowd looked at the performance of the people and sighed. Fortunately, they were not soldiers under their command. Otherwise, they would have trained them well and let them know how red the flowers were. With this shout, countless kerosene was poured down from the sky and poured on the soldiers of the three provinces who were still under the ladders. Waves of mournful screams were heard. The siege, which had been going smoothly, could not help but stagnate. This was a real siege in ancient times. Without powerful heavy weapons like cannons, every time they wanted to attack a city, they would have to pay a heavy price. With the help of the kerosene, the three provinces were once again defeated. The people on the city wall could not help but cheer again. The 2 consecutive victories made them look down on their opponents again. However, what they did not know was that both the kerosene and the pillows were auxiliary weapons to defend the city. In the end, if they wanted to defend the city, they still needed to rely on force. As expected, after a short break, the 3rd siege began. This time, neither the sleepers nor the kerosene were intimidated by the soldiers of the 3 provinces. A small number of them began to rush up the city walls. For the first time, the 2 sides engaged in close-range combat. Because the 3 provinces were the ones attacking the city, there were not many soldiers who rushed up the city wall tower. In the end, they were all beaten down by the people and the surrendered soldiers. If not for this, in a one-on-one battle, the defending side would have lost. After a few consecutive charges, both sides suffered losses. When the sky turned dark, the 2 sides temporarily stopped fighting. They began to eat and accumulate strength. Yang San, the chief steward in charge of logistics, came. Under his leadership and organization, countless women in the city got busy. They prepared a large amount of delicious food and sent it to the city gate tower. There were fresh soup and meatballs, which really filled the soldiers' stomachs. Everyone eat your fill. There is plenty of food. Only when you are full will you have the strength to fight. When we win, everyone will be heroes. There will be even more delicious food waiting for you. Yang San ordered people to carry the food up while encouraging everyone. The fragrance of the meat spread in all directions. When the soldiers smelled it, they involuntarily swallowed their saliva. All these years, it was said that the southern Ming dynasty ruled this place. However, in reality, Zhu Huixin, who held the military power, was the real ruler. He was a person who only had ambition and political means. He did not have the slightest idea of developing the economy. Under Zhu Huixin's rule, food had to be imported from Yangtze most of the time. It was easy to imagine what kind of life the people here were living. It was not an exaggeration to say that every year when spring came, even the tree bark would be gnawed off. Under such circumstances, it was easy to imagine the lives of the people. Not to mention eating meat, they had not even eaten rice for a long time. Now that the meatballs were brought up, whether it was the surrendered soldiers or the people, their eyes lit up. If not for the cold front soldiers watching from the side, they would have reached out to snatch them. Don't worry, don't worry. Everyone has a share, everyone has a share. Yang Sen chuckled and ordered basin after basin of delicious food to be brought up to the tower and placed in front of everyone. Food for tens of thousands of people was definitely a considerable amount. Fortunately, there were enough women in the city. When Yang San said that he was willing to help cook and provide a full meal, there weren't too many applicants. Almost half of the women in the city came over. With the help of these people, the cooking was naturally not difficult. In the end, they requisitioned a lot of iron pots and basins before they barely completed the task. When the delicacies were brought up, the sound of people eating could be heard everywhere. The sound of people smacking their lips was very satisfying and made them feel incomparably hungry. On the tower, the fragrance of the meat was carried by the wind and drifted to the barracks of the 3 provinces. Immediately, the sound of people swallowing their saliva was heard. Even General Rajiv's face darkened at this moment. This is simply a provocation. They are showing off. Rajiv stood up and looked at the tower of Yunnan Manor with a fierce face. He lowered his head and looked at the dry rations and the clear water he was eating. He was in a bad mood. Don't eat any more. Prepare to charge. Tell the soldiers that there is delicious food waiting for us in Yunnan Manor. As long as we capture the city, there will be meat to eat. Rajiv angrily ordered the army to continue attacking the city. The movements of the 3 provinces under the tower were quickly seen by the soldiers on the tower. Curses immediately sounded. Damn it, they actually don't want us to eat properly. These bastards. I haven't eaten my fill yet, and they are coming. Are they rushing to their deaths? Chapter 1588. Cutting off my food supply is the same as killing me. Come, watch how I chop off your heads and kick them like a chamber pot. On the city tower, more and more soldiers expressed their dissatisfaction. In an instant, the crowd was enraged and the soldiers' morale rose by a few steps. Looking at this scene, Yang Sen chuckled and immediately said, "Everyone, don't be anxious. Fight well. There will be supper delivered in the middle of the night. However, everyone must defend and not let the enemy attack. Otherwise, not only will there be no food to eat, even the safety of your family in the city will not be guaranteed." Hearing that there would be supper at night, many soldiers immediately felt their bodies were filled with energy. One by one they shouted, "Don't worry, with us here we will defend our home. With this meal, our lives will be sold to the 5-star army. Yes, we will definitely defend the city with our lives and not let the 3 provincial armies take a step forward. Defend Yunnan Manor with our lives and kill all the enemies. Defend Yunnan Manor and kill all the enemies." On the city tower, the morale of the soldiers was even higher. Under such circumstances, the 3 provincial armies launched a siege. One could imagine what the outcome would be. In the following process of the charge, the soldiers of the 3 provinces truly experienced what it meant to change. It felt as if their opponent had suddenly changed. After countless of their comrades had died in battle, Yunnan Manor still stood in front of them without any signs of wavering. After a night of fierce battle, the 3 provincial armies showed a trace of fatigue. Originally, they thought that after their 80,000-strong army arrived at Yunnan Manor, they would be able to easily take down the city. After all, the news said that Yang Qindong only brought 500 black cavalry with him. Even if they had enviable firearms in their hands, this small number of people was only enough for them to protect themselves. Who would have thought that after fighting until now, not only had they not taken down Yunnan Manor, they had not even seen the person in charge. Their opponents were just some surrendered soldiers who had no choice but to, in addition to some ordinary citizens in the city and the older ones. This kind of blow really made Rajiv and the others a little disappointed. They even began to doubt their own fighting strength. What's going on? How is it that Yang Qindong is able to unleash such powerful combat prowess? General Luo Guan asked in the main tent with a puzzled expression. Since it wasn't that his combat power wasn't good enough, then he could just find another reason to blame it all on Yang Qindong's command. This was a very good choice. No one knew how to answer this question. The morale of the people in the tent began to plummet. In fact, things were not as bad as they had imagined. As the defenders of the city, they had also paid a heavy price. After an afternoon and a night of intensive attacks, more than 10,000 surrendered soldiers were killed or injured. The civilians were even worse off. The number of casualties reached 20,000. This was the difference between untrained and trained. Those who had been trained would naturally be able to borrow strength and cooperate with each other. Those who had not been trained would only rely on their brute strength. If it weren't for Lung Feng's occasional attacks on the city walls, the city might not have been able to defend itself. Of course, this had a lot to do with the short amount of time they had to defend the city. Yang Qindong had promised everyone that he would only defend the city for 1 day and 1 night. Once the reinforcements arrived, they wouldn't have to risk their lives anymore. It was because of this hope that everyone could continue to persevere. Even though many of the civilians were still vomiting after seeing the blood, they endured it when they thought about how they would be able to return home with their silver. On the other hand, if there wasn't a time limit, their hearts would have been in chaos. Rajiv and the others didn't know this. They understood that the city was very difficult to attack, and the 5-star Army's reinforcements were about to arrive. They had reached a point where they had to make a decision. They could either continue to attack the city and charge without caring about their losses, or they could take advantage of the fact that the 5-star Army's reinforcements hadn't arrived and immediately retreat as far away as possible to preserve their limited strength. As for what to do, the generals looked at each other and didn't make a final decision. Report. Just when everyone didn't know what to do, a messenger entered the main tent. Report, a young man who claims to be Mutsong is outside the tent. He says he has an important matter to discuss with all of you. Mutsong, the eldest son of Shiping King Mubin. Luo Guan and Wu Yingtu looked at each other. Others didn't know, but they knew this person's identity. Next, Luo Guan explained Mutsong's identity to Rajiv and the others. After hearing that this person had Shiping King's background, hope reappeared in Rajiv's eyes. Quickly invite him in. At this time, Mutsong suddenly appeared outside the tent. Even if one thought with their toes, it was obvious why he was here. In the past, Shiping King was also a potential enemy of the 3 provincial kings. If this person dared to appear, he would definitely be captured alive. But now that there was a powerful person like Bugnam of Gojoseon, infighting was impossible. They should be thinking about how to unite. Under the guidance of the messenger, the extraordinary Mu Tsong walked into the main tent. As a minister and general of the Ming dynasty, the great-grandson of Qianning King Muing, the grandson of King Ding Yuan Muchang, and the son of Duke Qian Mubin, as well as the future 3rd-generation Duke Qian, he had a strong, noble aura. Just by walking in, his extraordinary aura was revealed, especially the smile on his face. It gave people a feeling like a spring breeze. In fact, after the ministers of the Ming dynasty, there were very few idiots, especially those who were groomed by big families to inherit the mantle. They had to undergo all kinds of training from a very young age. This was also the reason why the nobles could last for hundreds of years. The so-called existence was reasonable. The nobles were able to survive under the constant replacement of the ministers and the constant change of the emperor. They also had to put in quite a bit of effort behind the scenes. Mutsong, who had been trained as a successor since he was young, had been learning skills since he was 3 years old. Now, although he was only 17 years old, the aura around him was already not something normal people could compare to. After entering the tent, Mutsong first inspected everyone before cupping his hands in greeting. When he greeted Rabji and the others one by one, he called out everyone's names. Without being introduced, he could clearly recognize everyone. This was enough to prove his skills, and also showed that Mutsong had done quite a bit of work in secret. Like this, Mutsong's first impression of him was quite good. Rafi spoke up and gave them a seat. The 6 of them sat down together. After Mu Tsong sat down, Rafi looked at Luo Guan. The only Han general asked, "But I wonder why young Master Mu is here?" This was clearly a consultant who knew what was going on, but no one had any doubts about this statement. Even if everyone had guessed Mu Tsong's intentions, they couldn't just say, "What, are you here to help us?" "That's great, we're very grateful. Please make your move quickly. Just tell us what you need, and we'll agree to it." How could Mu Tsong not sense that Luo Guan was probing? He immediately smiled and said, "Generals, this young master is here on my father's orders to assist you in taking down Yunnan Manor." Everyone couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when their intentions were revealed. Even if they had guessed it, it had a completely different meaning when it came from Mu Tsong's mouth. But what does His Highness King Shiping want to do? This time, Rafi took the initiative to ask before Luo Guan could speak. It was clear that this person was indeed anxious. Seeing Rafi's hopeful eyes, Mu Tsong chuckled. Then he opened his folding fan and said with grace, "Generals, the current situation is very critical. The 5-star Army's reinforcements are about to arrive. The earliest wave might appear outside the battlefield in a few hours. In other words, there isn't much time left. If we still can't take down Yunnan Manor, have you considered the following situation?" "Situation? What situation?" Rafi asked with an unsightly expression. Seeing that the other party didn't want to face this question, Mu Tsong chuckled and said, "Generals, Bugnam of Gojosian has already arrived at Yunnan Manor. The next step is to solve the problem of the 3 provinces. Now that the 3 provincial kings are still alive, it means that Bugnam of Gojosian has no opponents here. Once the main force of the 5-star army arrives, with his personality, how could he tolerate the existence of generals here? I'm afraid a large-scale cleanup operation will be imperative at that time, right?" Everyone's expressions sank. This was exactly what they were worried about. If they didn't consider this problem, they would have already retreated. Why would they be stuck in a dilemma here? Since no one objected, Mu Tsong continued, "Now that Bangla has been destroyed by Bugnam of Gojosian and the 3 provincial kings are missing, everyone has become rootless duckweeds. If we don't think of a way to join a new faction, we can't think of any other outcome other than being destroyed. Oh, right. You don't have to think about where you can't go in the world. Hee. The truth is that other than Nanming, the surrounding areas have been occupied by the 5-star army. Even if you want to go, you don't have a direction." Rajiv's and the others' faces turned uglier and uglier as they listened to Lin Yun's words. Faced with this kind of humiliating words, they really wanted to object. However, they helplessly found that what Mu Tsong said was right. Even if they wanted to refute, they didn't know what to say. Everyone's silence was enough to explain the problem. Mu Tsong knew that the time had come, so he opened his mouth again and tried to recruit. "Generals, there are only 2 paths in front of you now. First, immediately surrender to Bugnam of Gojosian, and you might be able to keep your life. But forget about glory and wealth. To be honest, with your actions and the fact that you attacked the city, it's already good enough that you can keep your life. As for the second path, it's to join my banner. As long as you're willing to join, you'll be a general of Nanming. My father can guarantee your safety and your current position. After all, no matter how powerful Bugnam of Gojosian is, he's still subject of the great Ming. How can a subject provoke his master?" Chapter 1589. The matter was finally made clear. Mu Tsong didn't seem to be in a hurry for everyone to express their stance. Instead, he put away his folding fan and slowly sipped on the tea on the table. However, from time to time, his eyes would vaguely sweep across the crowd, indicating that his heart was not calm at all. Coming as a lobbyist, this time was also a risk. No one knew what Loveji and the others were thinking. What if they were prepared to surrender to Yang Qindong? Then wouldn't he be walking right into a trap and be captured to take credit? Although the possibility of this was very low, it was still possible. Therefore, Shiping King Mu Bin didn't agree to Mu Tsong coming as a lobbyist until Mu Tsong said it was a critical moment of survival. Yunnan Manor was where the Mu family had lived for generations. Without this place, they would have no roots, no weight, and no influence in the southern Ming Empire. For the Mu family's future, and to thank the great Ming Empire for their kindness to their ancestors, this risk was worth taking. That was why Mu Tsong appeared here. That was why he said those words. But in reality, his little heart was pounding rapidly. He was even prepared to die for a noble cause. Even if he died, he couldn't fall into Yang Qindong's hands and let Bugnam of Gojoseon use him to threaten his royal father. Mu Tsong carefully observed everyone. At this moment, everyone was seriously considering Mu Tsong's words. As he said, they really didn't have any other choice now. Disregarding everything else, it was indeed, as the other party had said, they had no way out. If they couldn't take down Yunnan Manor and rescue Zhu Huiqiang before the Five-Star Army's main force arrived, then they really wouldn't have a place to live in the future. Could they rescue Zhu Huiqiang just by taking down Yunnan Manor? Who knew if this person was alive or dead, or had fallen into Yang Qindong's hands? If it was the latter, they probably wouldn't be able to find Zhu Huiqiang even if they took down Yunnan Manor. In that case, what was the point of taking down Yunnan Manor? At the end of the day, they were determined to attack Southern Cloud Manor just to find a boss for themselves. In a place like the Great Ming Dynasty, where everything was particular about status, without Zhu Huihua's protection, their existence was unreasonable, and everyone had the right to punish them. This also meant that their existence would not last long. But now things were different. Mu Tsong was here. They had another choice, which was to become Shiping King's subordinates. That way they would have a backer and they would also have a name. Just as Mu Tsong had said, Shiping Wang was from the southern Ming dynasty. Yang Qindong was only a king with a different surname from the great Ming dynasty. If he dared to attack King Shiping, he would be making an enemy out of the southern Ming Empire. That would be a great disrespect, and he would lose in terms of innate ability. As for the matter of surrendering, no one even considered it. Their previous actions had already offended the Five-Star Army. Surrendering to them would only bring shame to themselves. Therefore, there was only one option left, which was to seek refuge with King Shiping. The generals quickly made a decision in their hearts. In their eyes, the reason why they were willing to obey Zhu Huihua's orders was because he was a king personally conferred by the great Ming dynasty. Now that they had a better choice, Zhu Huihua's life and death had nothing to do with them. I'm willing to pledge my loyalty to King Shiping. The first to think it through was Rajiv. He was originally a general of the Binjgrad kingdom. Now that the kingdom was destroyed, he had no other choice. After Rajiv took the lead, Luo Guan, Wu Yingtu, Azad, Huck, and the others also expressed their loyalty to Mu Tsong one by one. All right. Mu Tsong stood up excitedly. After all, he was only a 17-year-old youth. Even if he was shrewd, there was a limit to it. Seeing that he had achieved his goal, of course, he would be excited. Young master, I wonder what King Shiping wants us to do next. It was Rajiv who asked, but his attitude was very humble. It seemed like young Master Mu Tsong was the leader in the absence of King Shiping. At this moment, not only Rajiv, but the other generals also looked at Mu Tsong, waiting for his answer. Ahem. After clearing his throat, Mu Tsong raised his head higher and spoke more forcefully. Everyone, thank you for believing in my father. Don't worry. Since everyone has made a wise choice, you will be part of King Shiping's residence in the future. You will also be part of the Southern Ming dynasty. Even if we can't defeat the Five-Star Army in the future, as long as we withdraw from the battlefield in time, the Five-Star Army won't dare to do anything to you, because you have the powerful great Ming dynasty behind you. Yes, yes. Everyone nodded like chickens pecking at rice. This was the result they wanted. Speaking of this, it had to be said that the great Ming dynasty was still a colossal existence in everyone's mind. Whether it was territory, army, or economic strength, the southern Ming dynasty and Bai Ming were not small countries that could be compared to them. There were even a lot of rumors that the five-star army was invincible and destroyed countries wherever they went, but they didn't seem to have any conflicts with the great Ming dynasty. Even though Bai Ming had caused trouble for the five-star army several times, they only focused on defense. All of this seemed to indicate that the five-star army was strong, but they were not a match for the great Ming dynasty. The reason why the great Ming dynasty didn't really attack the five-star army was because they were all Han and had the same ancestry. Secondly, the great Ming dynasty's national policy was that they wouldn't attack unless they were attacked. The five-star army respected the great Ming dynasty, so everyone was at peace with each other. Otherwise, if the southern Ming dynasty or Bai Ming really wanted to attack, the five-star army wouldn't be a match for them. Once this saying spread, it was seen as a golden rule by many people, especially since the five-star army didn't come out to deny it. It was seen as the truth by many people. Therefore, to be able to join the king of Shiping's army was very tempting for Rajiv and the others. Back to the main topic. After getting Rajiv and the others to surrender, Mu Tsong told them the result of his discussion with his father. Everyone, my father's intention is to take advantage of the fact that we have the advantage of military strength and take down Yunnan Prefecture before the five-star army's reinforcements arrive. We need to prove to the southern Ming dynasty that we are strong. Only then can we get more support from the imperial court. At the same time, it's also a warning to Yang Qindong not to provoke us. Otherwise, he won't be able to bear the consequences. Well said. Rajiv and the others immediately cheered when they heard this. They had just joined the king of Shiping's army and urgently needed an opportunity to prove themselves. Taking down Yunnan Prefecture was the best way to prove themselves. With such a simple idea, everyone reached a consensus. This was exactly what Mu Tsong wanted. Under the premise that they had the same goal, the next step was to discuss the next military plan. The siege had to continue. Not only that, they also had to think of a plan to deal with the five-star army's reinforcements. The generals began to use their talents and discussed. On the tower of Yunnan Prefecture, the three provincial armies had stopped attacking for half an hour. In the three provincial palaces in the city, Yang Qindong's expression didn't change after he heard Ba Daojiang's report. Sixth young master, do you think they're not going to retreat? Ba Daojiang asked again when he didn't get a response. Obviously, he wanted to learn more. Yang Qindong admired Ba Daojiang very much. This person was very uncouth, but because of this he was very loyal. Moreover, he had followed Yang Qindong for more than 10 years and had performed well. The black cavalry was about to be expanded. When the time came, the position of a captain would be set in stone. Yang Qindong naturally nurtured such a talent. After glancing at Ba Daojiang, Yang Qindong said, whether they escape or not, their ending won't change. Since they're enemies with the five-star army, there are enemies. Unless they surrender, they won't be able to escape our pursuit, even if they run to the ends of the earth. Magnanimous, Ba Daojiang couldn't help but praise after hearing this. Yang Qindong gave everyone the impression that no matter how big the problem was, he wouldn't care about it and he could solve any problem easily. With such an omnipotent, capable, and invincible leader, what was there to be afraid of? The only thing to be afraid of was that the enemy would be scared and there wouldn't be a big battle to fight. In the face of Ba Daojiang, who was thirsty for knowledge, Yang Qindong certainly wouldn't just say that. He thought for a moment and said, actually, what the three provincial armies will do is no longer the young master's concern. What I'm thinking about now is where the king of Shiping went. It's impossible for him not to hear about such a big thing. It's strange that he hasn't done anything yet. As the saying goes, there must be a demon behind this. This is the person we need to guard against. Yang Qindong's words stunned Ba Daojiang. Sixth young master, do you mean that our biggest enemy is the king of Shiping? For now, yes. After all, an enemy who doesn't make a move is the scariest. Once he makes a move and we know his purpose, there's nothing to be afraid of. How about this? Send someone to inform Beta Persei and tell him to be careful. Also, tell Yang San to keep an eye on the city. The Mu family has been living in Yunnan Prefecture for generations. No one knows how strong his hidden forces are here. There's no harm in being on guard. Yes. Ba Daojiang's expression became a lot more serious after hearing this. He had already understood the meaning behind Yang Qindong's words. The most threatening king of Shiping had not made a move until now. It was very likely that he was planning something in the dark. This was what they needed to guard against the most. While everyone's attention was still on the city defense battle, Yang Qindong had already seen the bigger picture. Ba Daojiang felt that he still needed to learn to be vigilant in times of peace. He needed to learn to be vigilant all the time. Chapter 1590. Just as Yang Qindong thought, a group of people were having a gathering in a rather large courtyard in the southern Cloud Manor. The courtyard was filled with people. If one looked carefully, one would see that their waists were bulging and they were all carrying weapons. At this moment, there was no one else other than the three great clans in Yunnan who could rise up such a force in the city. The three great clans of Yunnan referred to clans that had a certain amount of power and wealth. There were many forces like this in the entire great Ming dynasty, as big as the capital city of the northern Ming dynasty and the capital city of the southern Ming dynasty. Such forces existed in small towns. This was what people often called the Sure family group. It could also be called the tyrant. Speaking of aristocratic groups, they were not only in the great Ming dynasty but also in other countries. Yang Qindong's method of dealing with them was very direct. If words had to be used to describe it, it would be 4 words. Uprooting them. Yes, uprooting them. No matter what kind of background they had or what kind of backing they had, even their country would be destroyed. So why would they care about a small force like yours? If you know what's good for you, take out 90% of your wealth and we can spare your lives. However, you can't stay where you were before. You will have to move out like most people. This is also the best way to reduce their influence. On the other hand, if they encountered people who wanted money more than their lives, they would be killed. The money would directly go to Yang Xie's treasury and could be used to fill the treasury, making it much simpler. It was precisely because of this that without the existence of the so-called aristocrats, the security of the land occupied by Yang Xie quickly stabilized. After all, there was no one to organize them to resist the Han army, which was equivalent to having no opponents. All this time, Yang Qindong had dealt with the aristocrats of foreign races. He had not directly come into contact with the aristocrats of the Han. South Cloud Manor was the first town that the Yang faction had conquered. Naturally, some of the problems that had been hidden under the surface were exposed. Yunnan Manor was the capital of Yunnan. To be able to be called one of the 3 great clans, their influence was not something that ordinary small clans could compare to. Usually, they were in a competitive relationship. After all, the market was only so big. The more you did, the less you would get. So usually they hated each other to death. But now, because they had a common goal, they were united. There was no such thing as an eternal friend in the world, only eternal benefits. The so-called 3 great clans were the Qin clan, Wang clan, and Li clan. Speaking of which, these 3 families all had a close relationship with the king of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huixin. They were either related to him by blood, affection, or direct interests. Let's put it this way, the reason why these 3 clans were able to grow so big was all thanks to Zhu Huixin's daily care. The reason why these 3 families were able to grow so big was because they had a very good relationship with the Mu family, who was previously known as the King of Yunnan. Now that Zhu Huitu's whereabouts were unknown, the 3 families did not know that the 3 provincial kings had been captured by Yang Qindong. That was why they didn't make a move until they received Wang Mubin's letter. Only then did they have a clear direction. Now, They gathered together for this meeting to discuss how to gain benefits in this chaotic world. Merchants didn't like chaotic times, and so did nobles. Although this represented an opportunity, it also represented killing intent. After all, they could make up for it in the future if they made less money. But if they lost their lives, they would lose everything. However, they only had money and a little power. It was impossible for them to stop the general trend, let alone the powerful 5-star army. Therefore, when chaos came, they could only watch it first. Just as they were thinking about whether they should meet Yang Qindong and sound him out, King Shiping's letter arrived. The 3 families all received the letter, and the content was almost the same. King Shiping asked them to join forces to create chaos in the city and act as spies for them to counterattack Yunnan Prefecture. The letter also stated that Yang Qindong's daily behavior was quite cruel to the nobles. If the 3 families did not cooperate, they could only leave 10% of their wealth and get out of Yunnan Prefecture. It was this letter that completely made the 3 families make a choice, which was to become enemies with Yang Qindong. After all, their roots were in Yunnan Prefecture, and they owned a lot of land and industries here. If they could take away their industries, what about their land? Therefore, once they really left this place, it meant that they would lose a lot. This was absolutely the same as taking away their lives. No one was willing to give up everything. Take out the foundation that generations of their family had worked hard for decades, or even hundreds of years. If they did that, they would not be able to see their ancestors after death. Since they didn't want to surrender, the only way left was to fight with their lives on the line. Fortunately, the main force of the 5-star army had not yet entered the city, so they still had a chance. Especially with King Shiping outside the city, it seemed that they had a high chance of winning. The 3 families sat together. The heads of the 3 families, Qi Ningkang, Wang Shufu, and Li Jin, sat facing each other in the innermost secret room in the courtyard. Since the 3 families had made a decision, the next step was to see how much strength they could contribute. Qi Ningkang was the first to speak. The Qin family can organize a team of 1,000 people. The Wang family can organize a team of 800 people. The Li family can also organize a team of 800 people. Wang Shufu and Li Jiayin also expressed their opinions one after another. For a big family like theirs, it was not difficult to gather such a number of people with guards and some workers. Moreover, the great Ming dynasty did not prohibit weapons from being sold in the market. It only prohibited armor from being sold in the market, so weapons were not a problem for them. With the strength of nearly 3,000 people in hand, the 3 heads of the big families looked at each other with a faint expression of excitement. They knew that once this matter was completed, they would definitely be great contributors. Their achievements in the future would definitely be greater than now. If they could even capture or even kill Bugnam of Gojoseon alive, it was very likely that they would be heavily rewarded by the imperial court of the southern Ming dynasty. That's right, the target of the 3 families was Yang Qindong, which was the original king residence of the 3 provinces where he was now. At this time, the defense of the king residence of the 3 provinces could be said to be extremely weak. All the forces that could be used were sent to the city tower to guard the city. This caused the defense of the king residence to be less than 1/10 of the usual. This was the time for them to attack. Under a surprise attack, with the advantage of numbers, it was very likely that they would succeed. If that was the case, not only would the king of Shiping thank them, but the emperor of the southern Ming dynasty would also thank them. After all, Yang Qindong's existence was a huge threat to everyone. With the soldiers in hand, the next step was to discuss the invasion plan. Based on the 3 families' understanding of the southern Cloud Prefecture, they quickly formulated an invasion route to ensure that the army would be placed outside the king residence of the 3 provinces without attracting any attention and launch a fatal attack. Since there was time, the 3 heads then went to make arrangements. For example, the distribution of weapons and raising of morale required time. Therefore, they set the time for the attack to be 4 hours later, which was before noon. Yang Chendong was completely unaware of all this. Not only did he not know, but Yang Sen also did not receive any news. Compared to the three families that had been in the Southern Cloud Prefecture for many years, Yang Sen's Security Bureau was considered an outsider. It was not difficult for them to hide some things. At this time, Yang Sen also received Yang Chendong's instructions. Then he arranged for scouts to go outside the city. Since the young master said that the king of Shiping was likely to be here, of course, he would go and find out where the king of Shiping was. Yang Sen was on the move. But at this time, the army of the three provinces outside the city had a bigger military operation, which was to ambush the first reinforcements of the five-star army, which was the troops of Yao Yingjun from Guizhou province. Taking advantage of the fact that they were the closest, Yao Yingjun persuaded Jiang Wuqing to surrender and led 20,000 troops straight to Southern Cloud Prefecture. The vanguard general of this army was Jiang Wuqing. He led 5,000 cavalrymen and rushed to the front line. Since Jiang Wuqing had made the decision to surrender to the five-star army, of course, he wanted to perform well. Therefore, he gathered all the war horses and formed a team of 5,000 cavalrymen in order to be the first reinforcements to appear outside Southern Cloud Prefecture. In this way, it would be impossible for Yang Chendong not to remember him. They were determined to perform well. The closer they were to Southern Cloud Prefecture, the faster the cavalrymen moved. Gradually, they pulled away from Yao Yingjuan's 15,000 infantrymen and appeared at the place where the Mu family set up an ambush. After Rajiv and the others decided to surrender to the king of Shiping, the army of the three provinces was changed to the Mu family army. In a short period of time, they changed their name again. Originally, they were called the Bengal Army, then the Three Provinces Army, and now they were called the Mu Family Army. Perhaps it was because the name was changed too frequently that everyone simply did not care. After the name change, Mu Tsong was given the authority to lead the troops. He first arranged for Angela and Miaoying to continue to lead the troops to attack Southern Cloud Prefecture. He asked them to create a commotion to confuse the five-star army. Next, he brought Luo Guan, Azad, and Huck along with their 20,000 soldiers to set up an ambush on the official road from Tsujing Prefecture to Southern Cloud Prefecture. This time, Mu Bin had made a good plan. He had only sent out 10,000 soldiers, but he had used righteousness to recruit more than 50,000 helpers. In this battle, no matter if he won or lost, he would not suffer too much loss. He could even take the opportunity to weaken the strength of these surrendered generals. Wasn't that perfect? He only had 10,000 soldiers, while Rajiv and the others had more than 50,000 soldiers. If the other party wanted to rebel against him, wouldn't he have no way to stop them? Now, whether it was a siege or an ambush, it was a good way to weaken the enemy's strength. When Rajiv and the others don't have enough troops, they would trust Zhao Hai more and be more obedient. Chapter 1591. Meanwhile, Mu Tsong had brought 20,000 soldiers to the edge of the forest. The 20,000 soldiers entered the forest beside the official road and drew their bows. They were ready to attack at any time. This was the first battle after joining Shiping. Everyone wanted to perform well to raise their status. The three generals all wanted to perform well. They were all on high alert. Just the scouts were sent 10 miles away, just in case. Finally, less than 2 hours after the 20,000 soldiers entered the forest, the scouts at the front reported that the reinforcements from Guizhou had appeared. The 5,000 cavalry led the way. They were very fast and were less than 5 miles away from the forest. But at the same time, there was also bad news. The cavalry was too fast, separating them from the main force behind them. This ambush was destined to not be able to wipe out all of the enemies. Whatever. 5,000 cavalry is not a small force. Let's attack them first. Mu Tsong thought it was a pity, but he quickly made the decision. After all, as a general, the biggest taboo was to constantly plan. It would only cause them to lose all their advantages. Although it was cavalry, Mu Tsong was very confident in fighting 5,000 with 20,000. He was well prepared. Not only him, but his subordinates were also full of confidence. They liked to bully others with numbers because this way their chances of winning would be higher and their safety would be more guaranteed. Time slowly passed. The 5,000 cavalry, led by Jiang Wuqing, did not know there was an ambush here. Originally, they needed to send scouts to scout the forest first. However, they did not have the time now. No one knew what the situation in Yunnan Manor was like. If they could arrive earlier, they would be able to help Bugnam of Gojoseon defeat the enemy. They would be able to contribute sooner. With this thought in mind, Jiang Wuqing hated the fact that the horse he was riding was too slow. How could he do something like stopping? Just like that, the 5,000 cavalrymen entered the forest on both sides of the official road. Mu Tsong's shout came from the forest after all the cavalrymen entered. Then the whooshing sounds of arrows rang out, accompanied by piles of boulders that suddenly piled up on the official road. The appearance of the boulders instantly cut the 5,000 cavalry into several parts. Except for 100 cavalry who ran at the back and turned to escape in time, the rest, including Jiang Wuqing, were trapped on the official road. They became live targets in the eyes of the 20,000 Mu soldiers. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Under the continuous barrage of arrows, the cavalry who had nowhere to hide were shot one after another and fell to the ground. Jiang Wuqing was better off. Under the protection of his personal guards, he was not hit by any arrows. However, the situation had become very bad. As wave after wave of arrows were shot, the number of personal guards around him was constantly decreasing. "General, let's charge." The guards watched as their comrades were shot and died one by one. They did not even see the enemy's shadow. They could not help but feel anxious. "Charge!" Everyone dismount and charge towards the mountain in the east. Of course, Jiang Wuqing knew that he had fallen into a trap. However, it was too late to say anything now. He could only place all his hopes on the road of countercharge. Want to charge? Prepare the stones. When they come, blast them back. He. In the forest, Mu Tsong was in a good mood. Seeing that he had trapped 5,000 enemy cavalry in one move, he felt like he had the power of the world in his hands. Jiang Wuqing chose to charge. He led the troops towards the dense forest in the east again and again. However, he had to retreat again and again because of the boulders rolling down. Under this repeated process, the number of soldiers around him decreased. There were less than 2,000 people left. "We surrender. Please don't kill us." Finally, some of the cavalry could not hold on any longer. They threw their weapons to the ground and squatted. Many of these people were originally from the 3 provinces army. They believed their General Jiang Wuqing and surrendered to the 5-star army. At the end of the day, they didn't have any sense of identity with the 5-star army. Now, in order to survive, they had to surrender. So what? Kill. Don't let any of them go. Kill them all. I want them to know what will happen to the 5-star army if they surrender. Mu Tsong's eyes were filled with hatred as he roared. These cavalry should be the people of Shiping King. However, they first surrendered to the 3 provinces king, and now to the 5-star army. He did not have a good impression of these people at all. The arrows did not stop. It was the same even if you dropped your weapon. Soon, hundreds of people were killed by the arrows. This made the kneeling people realize that surrendering was not a wise choice. "Let's fight. Pick up your weapons. We have no way out." No one knew who shouted, but the cavalry soldiers who had turned into infantry stood up one by one. At this moment, their eyes were red as they shouted and rushed into the forest with all their might. However, sometimes you can't risk your life just because you want it. It also depends on whether the opponent gives you the chance. Boulders continued to roll down from the dense forest, accompanied by arrows. Few people who rushed into the forest could return alive. After repeating this twice, The injured Jiang Wuqing realized that there were less than 500 people around him who could fight. 5,000 turned into 500. In less than an hour, he knew that he was going to lose this time. Because he charged too quickly, he did not even have the chance to wait for reinforcements. Soldiers, this general has let everyone down. I will atone for my sins with my death. Come, let's launch the final charge together. Jiang Wuqing held a spear in his hand. His face was ashen. In his heart, he prayed that Yao Yingjun must treat his family well. This was his last hope before his death. Then he led the soldiers to charge. Battle cries rang out. However, because of the harsh terrain, it did not take long for the cries to stop. Jiang Wuqing fell on the path of the charge. He was hit by 4 arrows. One of the arrows hit his chest and took his life. 5,000 cavalry were left here, just like that. This gave Mu Tsong and the others great confidence. The 5-star army is only SOSO. Since we can defeat them once, we can defeat them a second time, a third time. Ha ha ha. Mu Tsong shouted as if he was crying with joy. The ambush in the dense forest severely injured Yao Yingjuan's troops who came to help. When he heard the cavalry report that the cavalry had set up an ambush in the dense forest, he was really shocked. He immediately sent out scouts to inquire about the situation. Then he sent a telegram to Yang Qindong. The general meaning was that the situation had changed. Their reinforcements might not be able to arrive on time. He asked for Bugnam of Gojoseon's understanding. And before this telegram was sent to Yang Qindong, the situation in Yunnan Manor changed. First, Rajiv and Wu Yingtu led more than 30,000 troops to launch a crazy siege. They quickly attracted the attention of the city guards. Under the fierce attack, the West Gate was in danger. Beta Persei had no choice but to send reinforcements from the other 3 gates. There was nothing wrong with this move, but this was exactly what Sheeping King Mubin wanted. He already knew that Yang Qindong was good at bewitching people. It was obviously not feasible to take down Yunnan Manor from the front, so he planned to sneak into the city. As long as he could succeed, the 10,000 troops he led would become the main force. When the time came, it would be no problem to take down the 3 provinces. For this plan, he had already sent a message to the 3 major families in the city. He asked them to send some people to the East Gate and cooperate with him to lead the army into the city. The 3 major families had already bet their lives on Sheeping King. Naturally, they would cooperate with him. First, they sent 1,000 people to the vicinity of the prince's mansion in the 3 provinces and secretly controlled all the exits there to prevent Yang Qindong from escaping. Then, more than 1,000 people suddenly appeared after transferring troops from the East Gate to the West Gate. More than 1,000 guards from the 3 major families, armed with various weapons, still had some fighting power. The most important thing was that the timing of their appearance was too good. They caught the soldiers guarding the East Gate by surprise. Only 1,000 people and 500 surrendered troops were responsible for guarding this place. Even Beta Persei did not leave any main force here. He focused all his energy on guarding the West Gate. This gave the enemy an opportunity to take advantage of. The battle ended very quickly. The East City Gate was breached in less than a quarter of an hour due to the fact that their military strength and combat prowess were inferior to the enemy's. Then the East Gate opened from the inside. The 10,000 Mu family troops outside the city suddenly appeared and jumped in. The East Gate was broken, and a large number of Mu family troops rushed into the city. However, they did not rush to the West Gate. Instead, their target was the 3 provinces' palaces in the city. When the news was passed from the defeated soldiers to the West Gate, Beta Persei was really shocked. Quick, quick! Pick 10,000 people to go to the 3 provinces' palaces to protect the young master's safety. Where is Cheng Hu? I'll leave the battle here to you. You must guard this place, no matter what. Beta Persei called Cheng, and ordered him while mobilizing the troops. This was Beta Persei, who had followed Yang Qindong to fight in the north and south, had already developed a certain momentum and did not appear to be flustered. Yes, second brother, don't worry. As long as Cheng, who is still here, the west gate will not be lost. Cheng, who patted his chest and promised. Then he watched Beta Persei lead the 10,000 soldiers into the city. The 3 provinces' palaces. Shouts suddenly sounded outside. Dao Xiao and Ba Daojiang also quickly appeared in front of Yang Qindong. When they reported the situation outside, they also asked if they needed to retreat to another place. The reason why the Black Cavalry was called elite was not only because they were well-trained and well-equipped, but more importantly because of their fearless spirit. How could such an army be flustered by the sudden appearance of the enemy? You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.